Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. I am live coming from the country of Spain, and more specifically, Carmona. I think that's how you pronounce it. Slight life update, I guess. Last year, I decided I would potentially move to Spain. I went through a very lengthy process of arranging or trying to apply for a digital nomad visa. Obviously, United Kingdom's left to Europe, so it's a bit more difficult traveling around Europe these days. So I applied for a visa, and then I just had delay after delay. Some on my side in terms of my health at the time, a lot of these attacks that were going on. Thankfully, this year, as it's kind of continued on, my health has leveled off, and it just seemed the right time for me to make that move. So yeah, probably over a month ago, 2 months ago, I came over for a couple of weeks, 2 3 weeks, and I did that podcast on Cadiz. And yeah, that was specifically to get a stamp in my passport, which is all part of the whole visa process. And then I went back to the United Kingdom for a couple of weeks, and now I'm back in Spain. So yeah, I've been busy, really busy, basically trying to find somewhere to live. So I've been doing that. Thankfully, I found somewhere which is good, quite close to the beach. So I'm looking forward to moving in, but I can't go there until sort of second week in September. So I'm still bouncing around. So hence why I'm in a place called Carmona. And as it turns out, this place is pretty energetic even. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting aspects of architecture. It's very, very ancient. The energies are a little bit trippy. It's not all good, but yeah, it seems like quite an interesting place with a lot of places of high strangeness. So I'm quite excited to do some research and maybe visit some of these sites that are around this town. The reasons for the move have been particularly health related. It's always during the winter time that I seem to suffer the most, and so I started to reconsider that maybe I should live somewhere that's hot, super hot. So that was my MO. And then the country that I chose was Spain. And that more specifically because I'd been looking at a map and I started to feel all this energy from certain areas of Spain. And it was a toss up really between Portugal and Spain. And I chose Spain because it was slightly easier, I think, in terms of applying for a visa. So that kind of swayed my decision making a little bit. And then plus, yeah, I couldn't really think of anywhere to be in the UK. I didn't really want to go to a place like London, didn't really want to move back to Brighton again. And I was just finding the atmosphere of the UK quite heavy. I'm just getting sick of the constant cloud cover and so yeah, I just thought, yeah, maybe it's a good time for me to go and have new adventures. So hence why I'm here, and it was a big adventure, like literally driving down in my Vauxhall Corsa, which is not a new car, it's like 2007, so it's quite old. And I went via the Calais sort of Eurotunnel service, which is mad. I've never really sort of been on there before. I've been on the Eurostar, which goes from St Pancras into Paris numerous occasions. I used to go with a French girl, but yeah, I've never taken the car on the train, and it's weird. Like you literally drive your car onto a train, and then you're going through this tunnel underneath the English Channel. It's really mad. But yeah, super efficient. Literally only takes 30 minutes going from Folkestone to Calais. And so super quick. And you look at the ferries, it's probably about 5 or 6 hours and it's more expensive. So it's actually cheaper to take the Eurotunnel. So that was quite an experience. And then it was like an epic 3 day journey driving through France and then all the way through Spain. I think roughly it was about 1,500 miles. So it probably took about 3 days. I kind of hoped that maybe I'd be able to drive like 12 hours, 14 hours. But yeah, I think literally about 8 or 10 hours I was just really starting to struggle. So I had to spread it over about 3 days, and it actually worked out quite well. Sort of stayed in quite interesting places, and when you book hotels sort of last minute, they tend to be quite cheap. So that kind of helps as well. But yeah, generally I've just been bouncing around the area, more specifically focusing on finding somewhere to live, which is now done. But I have been creating content alongside that as well. Like I've been doing TikTok. I've gone over to the dark side. I never thought I would start creating short form content because I don't like the idea of people's attention spans. kind of shortening and stuff. And I myself have always been a bit like not liked kind of short form content, but yeah, it's I'm getting a lot more love on TikTok in terms of views and subscribers than I ever do on YouTube. So it's kind of piqued my interest a bit. So yeah, if you want to check out some short form, it's on both channels like YouTube and TikTok. But I'm seeming to get more views on TikTok at the moment, and Instagram I get zero. I get nothing, nada, no love from them. So yeah. Anyway, that's that. But anyway, I've been waffling on about my location. I think let's get on with what today's topic is going to be about. I think overall, particularly for me, it's been exciting times, but there has been this constant pressure and stress I've actually felt from the external world and the chaos and just everything that's been going on. I've just actually really been struggling to handle it. Usually I'm being pretty resilient, but for some reason things have been really getting to me. So yeah, I'm maybe making concerted effort not to view so much kind of newsy content because yeah, it's something that just basically sucks your energy, and it's just this big circus like theater. I can't see any end to the chaos, and I literally today was starting to think because I remember like I had some content videos before, and I think I spoke about in podcasts about my ability to feel into energy and how I was feeling into the various months of the year, and as the year was going on, like was just getting more and more of a headache, and it came to about November, it was just like a really bad headache, and yeah, it might be linked to the overall collective, or it might be more my own personal experience. I don't know. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that kind of plays out because again, the topic of this podcast is very relevant for what I'm talking about now, but that whole idea of these abilities and whether it's given me truthful information or whether I've been completely compromised and it's just given me falsity. It's been like creating a simulation around me. So yeah, I've been, I guess, quite pessimistic just due to everything that's happened to me this year, like with my health, and then obviously the whole world in general. I've become quite pessimistic generally overall about everything, if I'm being honest. I think there is like overall hope to the big plan, whatever that is, wherever that takes us. But at the moment, yeah, I'm just in a not in a sort of depressive state, but just like I'm just incredibly jaded by everything. It's just boring, just the whole kind of chaos, I think. So yeah. Anyway, so I guess that is a real reflection of but yeah, and it's not to say I'm in this excitement, a new place, I'm excited. I'm gonna be living somewhere new. I'm excited. I'm near the beach. I'm excited. Potentially gonna be get back to do my windsurfing. So all these things I'm excited about. I'm excited to be able to do content in a completely new country, which is amazing. And it seems, the more place I go to and some of the energies I've been feeling, yeah, I'm quite excited to sort of bring that stuff forward. But I guess it's more like the external world, like the political sphere, the geopolitical sphere. It's just nuts. I just realised I'm already 8 minutes in, over 8 minutes, and I still haven't talked about what this podcast is about. Um, I guess it is going to be quite personal in terms of what actually has been happening. I've given hints and various other podcasts and some of the videos that I've released. But I think I have enough perspective really to sort of give an overall general account. And I think this might change obviously in the future as I gather more data and sort of understand what's been happening more and more. But yeah, it's just been quite an intense year, particularly towards the end of 2024. So November, December, particularly for me, was incredibly painful. And in January, February, March, I was just it being hit on all sides, both for my health, like physically, but then also just weird, crazy spiritual stuff, like spiritual attacks, just and then this very out of the blue kind of love connection that just came out of nowhere. And it's all for me, it's all kind of connected. And I've had, various sessions with people like QHHT regression sessions, and I've had various like synchronicities, and there's been a lot of current reading I've had done. And, again, I had sessions with various like other people just trying to decompress maybe what's gone on. There's one particular book that I've been reading at the moment, which I've just finished it last night, in fact. and it's called The Love Bite: The Alien Interference in Human Love Relationships. And yeah, I knew about this whole concept before. Like overall, you get this idea of like twin flames, like, sort of could be a man and a woman, or it can be same sex as well, apparently, where these two is like a ultra divine love affair and they get together and then they have a mission to sort of heal the world or heal themselves. And it's all this big, grand kind of narrative. But I've always been very aware of the opposite side of that, that potentially maybe there's something a bit darker kind of going on. And that's always been in the back of my mind because I've personally been through two of these experiences now. The second one now was like, pretty intense and just crazy. Some of the details I'm going to go into, I'm sure I'm going to lose some of you because it is just like so wild. Sometimes I'm like, when I start writing it down or thinking back what happened, I was like, this is why. I mean, literally, I've never read anything or I've heard any other testimony from people sort of goes into some of the details of things that I experienced. So yeah, there's that. So because of my experiences and just some of the sessions I've been having, and then particularly this book, the Alien Love Bite book, which again I've always been aware of, but it's always been in the back of my mind. I tried to look at everything that's happened to me, like, oh, there's a big divine reason. I'm sure there is always a big divine reason for everything. But I think maybe we can look at bad situations with too much in terms of like rose tinted spectacles and maybe be a bit plain speaking to that. No, there's something a bit odd going on. And I'm coming more into that side of thinking these days because, yeah, you can sound sort of overly paranoid, but sometimes, no, I think it's good to sort of describe things the way they actually are. And this book has really opened my mind about manipulation. And with this book is really framed a lot as like ETs, like aliens, particularly like greys. But in my instance, it felt more of a like an astral, sort of demonic, sort of interdimensional thing. And the thing I'm going to get into later is the whole language of it, how we describe this and where this, the source of all this interference, what is it? Um, is it being sort of practiced by different groups? Different entities, how do you describe it? But the more I've read in this book, it's just really sparked off some big questions overall in my life about how much this manipulation has been going on, not just within my love relationships, but just overall in my life. How long has this kind of been planned? So yeah, it's been very, very sobering. And I think it ties really into the whole human sphere as a whole, because I'm sure you can agree there's a manipulative force on Earth and it has that human component, but you could really go up the pyramid, how far does that go? Where does it go? What's the top of that tree, that control pyramid? Um, and so, yeah, it's just wild to kind of consider that, you can understand the manipulation on kind of the global context, but then why would they want to manipulate me? Because, I'm not a famous politician, I'm not a famous musician, actor, don't ever have any huge standing in society. I have hardly any subscribers in terms of the content I do. So why have I endured all this interference? It's bizarre. And I think a lot of this does, I mean, there's the kind of the overt physical world, spiritual world, and there's the maybe the subconscious aspect, I think is really, really important in terms of like getting more and more into the ideas of like the shadow self, the shadow of the collective, the world, and all these Jungian ideas, and about how, our lives were a reflection of our shadow, but also a reflection of the larger collective. So I think that plays into it as well. But I think it's important to say, I'm not saying I'm going to be completely right on everything I'm going to be talking about. Like, as always, I think it's important for your perspectives always to shift, and they always will. And I've just been exploring all avenues. But this podcast really just marks a point where I'm at the moment, and it marks the process where I'm at the moment in terms of what I've read, things I've experienced, some of the sessions I've had, some of the synchronicities that kind of come into view, kind of brought me to this point. So that's going to be mainly the topic about today. So I guess it's my spiritual attacks, which are quite personal, and folding ideas of this alien love bite concept and the idea of twin flames. But when that's done, also a few weeks ago, I released just to cheer you up, I released a video called The End Times, which is all about end times prophecies, a bit of my own findings in there in terms of like feeling energy, but just try to look at a wide cross section of different theories to do with end times. And again, this could be a reflection of my own subconscious that I've had enough and I want the world to end. That's quite a valid point. But yeah, I've got those videos on YouTube and Rumble and BitChute if you want to go see those, and they've got lots of pretty pictures. But I'm also just gonna paste at the end of this podcast as well. If you just want to listen, you can listen to it without pictures. That's fine. But if you want to see all the pretty pictures, I do recommend going onto YouTube or BitChute or Rumble and giving it a watch. But before I start, 50 minutes in, still waffling, um, I'm going to try and keep this as vague as possible. I want to talk about my experiences, but I don't want, it's my intention not to throw anyone under the bus. I think everyone is a victim in the story. I'm not, what I'm talking about is no way finger pointing at maybe some of the individuals involved. And, I could point a finger at myself in some respects. And there could be some aspects I'm reading completely wrong and I'm not correct on some of the certain situations that unfolded and my experiences. And bearing in mind a lot what I'm going to be talking about involved me being completely compromised, being manipulated by some force. So yeah, it just completely hijacked my energetics, my intuition. So again, like some of the information, the realizations I were coming to might be completely wrong. And maybe in a year's time, I'll have another higher level of understanding. We'll see. But I do feel there is definitely some force that's been manipulating me, without a doubt, this last year. Um, how I got infiltrated, I have various theories. Um, but yeah, again, it's just a big question. Like, how far does this go back in my life? But then also just, I'm even just thinking family wide as well, in terms of like, I know my mum's suffered from spiritual attacks and weird possessions and things. And she's kind of very much retreated into Christianity, and that's kind of her whole world. And she gets a lot of support. She's made great friends there and things. But it has got me thinking like how much overall this has affected my family as well, because definitely these last few years there's something very strange been going on, particularly within my love life. But yeah, this is also just a general conversation of like how far does that go back, and how much do these tentacles, affect the rest of my life. But it's been a real one-to-one lesson in what's happened to me and maybe some of the groups that I've been involved in, of just the manipulation when, particularly when people kind of come together, there's this sort of weird divide and conquer infighting thing that happens. And you can kind of see it in the internet space. You'll have this commentator having beef with this other particular commentator, and one particular group just suddenly will be quite collaborative, and then they'll just, I mean, you'll see it in your daily life. And how much of that is genuine, just like human psychology, like people basically playing up to their traumas, or is there something deeper going on? Or is there some force that's literally, dividing people and just causing chaos on purpose, in order to prevent humanity from getting together and basically just being more of a collective, more in harmony with each other. Because, like I say, I harbor no ill will to anyone involved in my own particular story, but also in the wider world. I think everyone's, majority of the time, trying to do their best. And I think, yeah, people's traumas get in the way. I think there is this kind of weird parasitic force that causes problems. And I think it's a complex overall picture of humanity for people to traverse every single day. Um, but yeah, I think that's the kind of the sad truth of maybe going back to that idea of the end times and that kind of chaos of actually coming to realizations about kind of what's been going on behind the veil, I guess. But again, what I'm going to talk about is pretty out there, and I'm not really aware of anyone else sort of sharing some of the information that I'm about to sort of divulge now. And yeah, a lot of it just feels so unreal, and then it's so like within my own body, within my own feelings. So you could by rights just think, oh, this guy's completely psychotic and he's lost his marbles and probably needs to see a psychologist. And yeah, maybe 30, 40 years ago, I probably would have been sectioned, I guess. Um, but I think I'm quite cognizant. I think everything that's happened is what I'm saying is happened around my sort of energetic vicinity. So yeah, so now that I've self-diagnosed myself as being sane, now I can go forth and start from the beginning. And I think it's important context to sort of give other wider sort of situations that happened in my life that kind of brought me to what happened this year. And I know I've, spoken on various podcasts and also videos about some of the energetic and like other kind of energetic connections I've had to people. And so I'm just going to briefly talk about that again, just because if you're new to listening to this, then it's important to have that context. But yeah, back a number of years ago, I'd literally moved back to the UK from Copenhagen. I'd been living for about a year. I ended back in Brighton, and I'd already lived there previously for probably about 8 years. I went to university there, probably like 99, and then graduated. And I did spend about a year back at home, and then I went back to Brighton, and then just tried to then be an adult and become self-employed and get involved in design. And I was doing video projection for kind of bands and DJs and all the rest of it, trying to be a VJ. And so yeah, back then I very much saw Brighton as it's very nightlife orientated, very creative place. In terms of like, the beginnings of the internet, when it became sort of mass used on a mass scale. Brighton was always very much a hub for digital creativity. A lot of agencies there. So it was a good place to be. So I was all kind of involved in that whole energy of like music and design. That was kind of my life. And then I couldn't wait to leave. I think about 2007, was it? Yeah, 2007, 2008. Um, just slightly before the first financial crisis. I moved to London, and I was just kind of, again, quite getting quite bored of Brighton. So I wanted to live in the proper big city. Anyway, so all of this happened. And then I moved back to the UK from Copenhagen. But then I just started to see Brighton in a completely different light to I had before. Because before it was very hedonistic, it was nightlife, it was commerce, it was business, it was all these things. But now, like having found sort of meditation just before I left London and I moved to Germany, I sort of got quite into transcendental meditation, and it all happened at once. It's when I sort of discovered conspiracies, and it was the very start of me having quite profound energetic experiences through meditation, but then just the unraveling of my wider world in terms of, the whole alien thing and UFOs and conspiracies just all happening at once. And unfortunately, also my health started to unravel as well at the same time. So yeah, I was now looking at Brighton in a whole new light, because obviously the energies of the place, a lot of creative people there, it has a lot of spiritual stuff there as well. So I was now having moved back there, I was discovering all these new spiritual practices, and I gravitated towards this movement spirituality center that was, I won't give it the name or get too much away, but it very much focused on a lot of Southeast Asian kind of practices. So things like Qigong and a lot of body shaking and sort of a lot of Tibetan practices, I think. Um, so yeah, I got quite into it because I was having real issues just overall, like spiritually, like with my health. And so this place really, really definitely did help. And it was good to have a vague community, and the people there were overall, they were nice. And so I was going there quite regularly, probably about 2 or 3 days a week, if not more. And it was just actually really heightening my whole energetic space as well. As really, that's when I start to feel energy and start to feel quite sensitive to it. And I don't know whether I always kind of wondered if it was maybe start to intersect why I started seeing a lot more UFOs in the sky. Of course, I was kind of looking a lot more, but I just seemed to have a lot more interactions with UFOs. I always kind of wondered whether some of these practices and maybe light up that side of my life in terms of those interactions of like lights in the sky, etc. But so yeah, I was going to centre, and it was a quite a pretty young lady there, and she was probably in about mid 20s, early 20s. And by this point, I'm probably about mid 30s, I guess. And for some strange reason, I just quite quickly developed a very big infatuation. And bearing in mind, usually when I used to do like internet dating, I was no way I was going to look age range mid 20s already. There's just no point because that age, you're not really into anything serious. You're just having fun, blah, blah, blah. So I was always like strictly, late 20s upwards. That was my age range. But anyway, so I had this big infatuation with this girl, just like literally just came out of nowhere. And generally, she's not someone my type. Just wasn't, she was not the sort of person I would go for. But she had this just amazing zest for life and just seemed quite highly, spiritually evolved, just really dialed in. And I just started to feel these really, really high levels of feeling towards her. And not only that, but just sexual energy as well was incredibly overpowering, overwhelming. And at this point, I knew nothing, the whole idea of like new age ideas to do with like twin flames and counterparts just wasn't on my radar. I didn't know what that was. But I was having all these really powerful energetic experiences with her and thinking about, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? I had no context for this, but it felt really, really spiritual just because of the amount of energy that was kind of involved. So I think generally through my own research, I might have just started to have synchronicities about the idea of twin flames. I think probably like YouTube videos. There's just a lot out there. There's a whole sphere of like the new age kind of content is all about twin flames, like tarot card readings. Just lots of content to do with twin flames. There's whole organizations that deal with it. Help you come in union with your twin flame. And just overall, the whole concept, as many as you know, is that idea of like a male and female version of the same soul coming together, like they have some kind of deep spiritual connection. And this is why it's like a really powerful divine love. And, it helps you to heal all your traumas because you're basically just triggering each other. You're just finding those trigger points, and you're healing, and then you're just having this amazing divine love. And then through that energy, reverberates into the collective, changes the earth, changes society. Maybe you work together on various spiritual projects, whatever. It's just hugely beneficial, like higher form of love that is just beyond any other kind of love. So at the time, I was quite taken in by this, mainly just because the energy I was feeling. I was like, well, that must be what's happening to me now. She must be this twin flame just because of these energies. Like this is the level of sexual energy I was feeling. The level of like love was just, like I said, it's just overwhelming. And I had some very unusual kind of energetic experiences. Maybe if like a few months in to me kind of knowing her, I think there was a general maybe connection forming really. I don't know to what extent she was feeling what I was feeling because I never really got an opportunity to speak to her about this. But definitely on my side, everything was feeling really, really just heightened. And we sometimes we would just spend days together or evenings together, and it would be super amazing. It would be incredible, but it was always on a knife edge. Like we could trigger each other really, really quickly, and then really like considering how intense it was, it probably like whatever happened. We never properly went out as boyfriend or girlfriend. We had dates, we kissed, we had other stuff. But probably the whole thing lasted maybe like a month, if that, 2 months. Really like flash in the pan, but also just incredibly intense. And it just all culminated in me being invited round to her house, and we'd had dinner with her friends, and then they all left, and so it was just me and her. And then just some crazy argument occurred, which I can't even remember what it was. And it ended like she was crying, I was crying, I left. I was in such a state, and then like sleeping in my car, I think. Can't remember. But I was just a complete it was so traumatizing, the whole thing. And it's bizarre really, like looking back, because it was just someone I had really known a very short amount of time and only spent, you know, not that long with really. So it was just crazy how I was just having these such intense feelings. So I think maybe I saw her a couple of times after that big, like, seismic evening where everything just, like, fell apart, like, really spectacularly. And then I just decided to stop going to the center, the spiritual center. It was just too much, it's too, and plus it was just really bleeding out into classes, like people really obviously kind of seeing what was going on. So yeah, I decided to stop going. But then in the back of my head, I always just thought, no, well, she's going to come back into my life. She's my twin flame. This is kind of what happened. It's just this is the kind of the folklore that surrounds this whole concept. And so I was just sure in my own head we were destined to be together, but I just needed to give her time. I needed time. We'd like sort it out. And we'd kind of come together. And probably months sort of went by. And then by this point, the feelings got less and less and less. And I think this is around about the time of like, the lockdown period. And I was living in Scotland at the time. And then she texted me, which is kind of out of the blue. She was interested in meeting up. And I was like, yeah, really sorry. I'm in Scotland. I'd like to meet up though. Yeah, cool. When I'm in Brighton next, I'll give you a call. We can arrange something. But that never happened because I didn't really go back to Brighton. This is kind of the start of also another whole load of challenges to do with my health. So I just was never in a healthy state to sort of do this. So yeah, that kind of all happened, and then I spent some sort of time in my sort of family home again, sort of trying to recover. And then once I got a little bit better again, I then moved back down to Brighton. By this point, she'd kind of left anyway, and then to be honest with you, I just did not feel the same way at all. Like it's just I then kind of realized, okay, well, she obviously wasn't my twin flame. This is maybe precursor to something else is going to happen in the future. So there was an inkling in my head something else is going to happen, but I don't know what. But I assumed maybe she was like what's called the false twin flame. It's just basically preparing yourself for this other divine love. And yeah, I just got to, because there was one situation where I'd spent an evening with this girl and I'd sort of walked back home. And then I was lying in bed. You have that moment before you're just drifting off to sleep and you go in this kind of in between state of like sleep and awake. I just went into this space of like pure divine love. I was just surrounded by this blissful love. It was just incredibly powerful. I'd never experienced anything like it. And this is why I was having these experiences. This is why I thought, well, this is some kind of pseudo religious spiritual event. This is something big, this means something because of all these energetic experiences. Which is why I got so kind of carried away in this kind of whole twin flame journey thing. But, even when I was experiencing like all this what I thought was this kind of very genuine twin flame experience, I was always aware there might be other side to it. Like it could be a manipulation. I'd heard like early on about ideas to do with alien love bites. So it was in my consciousness. I wasn't completely indoctrinated into this idea. I was cautiously kind of, going day by day, seeing how it unfolded. But I knew this could be possible. There could be a sort of darker reasoning behind what was happening. But yeah, you like to try and meet challenges with positivity in a way. And so I was just trying to do that. I was trying to see it with rose tinted spectacles, just trying to find the good in it. And I did a lot of good, I thought, came out of that because it, really just showed, oh, I have this huge problems of codependency, like massively. And this needs to be healed. So in that respect, it was really useful. And then I looked back at all my had long-term relationships, both me and my partners probably weren't well suited together at all. So overall, even though we've been for a long time, just looking back, they just weren't good relationships at all. And it's, partly my fault as well. So I've never had a really good template of my own, like a really good like romantic relationship. They've always been fractured. And again, this twin flame experience was just a small microcosm, just intensified to a million, and actually felt even more painful in many ways when it kind of broke apart. So now I'm back in Brighton, this first twin flame experience, she's gone, she's living back in her home country again. And again, I just started, is when the first sort of set of lockdowns started happening. I was having an amazing summer because I was just flouting all the rules and I was just going to the beach a lot and just I was windsurfing, I was paddleboarding, I was meeting people. I had no work to do because they closed all the businesses down. So I had no sort of design contracts at all. I got like a government bounce back loan to keep me afloat. So yeah, I took my 8 grand and then just waited for hopefully the world to open up so I could start working again. And during that time, I just got an amazing tan and had lots of fun. So I had quite a good first few lockdowns. But then as winter started to draw in, that's when I started to have like health problems again. And it's just been going on these last like 4 or 5 years, this constant cycle of kind of getting better in the summer and then winter time, something bad happening again. And it's been really, really frustrating. So, I'm trying to get to the bottom of what's going on. I'm sort of trying to like do it physically. So I'm seeing homeopaths, various alternative therapists try and help me. And I'm also trying to look at it spiritually as well, like from a multi-dimensional point of view. I'm starting to see a couple of people, multi-dimensional healers, at the time, on Zoom. Both vaguely know each other, and one of them is a lot younger than the other. And this the younger one, this girl, was just again just really dialed in. Just seems really dialed into some quite sacred kind of mystical, spiritual knowledge. And when I've had sessions with her, like her psychic visions of things to do with me, are just always really, really on point. I'm always incredibly impressed and things. And then she starts to do these like series of regular classes, which involves like various meditations and healing techniques and stuff. So I thought, yeah, I'll join that, just because I'm curious of these kind of things. And if it's going to help me like heal physically, improve myself spiritually, why not? So I'm doing that and I'm joining these classes. Unfortunately, my health, again, when it comes to winter times, not doing well. And this is when I'm living, at this point, I've moved out of Brighton, I'm living in Ditchling. And this is when I started doing these podcasts around the village of Ditchling. And looking back, like it was an amazing place, but it's a really haunted place. And the energies are really fluky. And I just remember like the first flat I lived in, incredibly haunted. Yeah, so lots of strange stuff was happening around me. Anyway, so I moved out of that village, moved back to Chester, lived with my folks. Just took the pressure off financially, they're on hand and stuff. It's just easier. Um, but yeah, so overall, I'm not looking for any romance. I've completely dropped out of really seeing people. Like friends are dropping away just because I'm not around. Because I always turn them down. I don't really want to see anyone anyway because I'm in such discomfort. Things. So I'm just becoming more and more isolated and living with my family. I'm just dedicated towards getting better physically. So I'm carrying on with these multidimensional healings with these various people. I'm doing these classes, right? And then so the second twin flame experience, or more aptly described, I would guess, love bite, alien love bite, and but I also question the idea of being an alien. It happens to be this younger kind of therapist that I'm seeing. And, I'm having online Zoom calls with her. She's doing these classes and things. And I've been probably doing this for about a year, year and a half, but at this point, sort of seeing her like every few months, I would have a session with her. She lives in a different country. Again, she's a lot younger than me. Just never came across my mind she was someone that would I romantically be with for all of those points. Different country, a lot younger than me again. Again, she lives thousands of miles away. And again, she was just a very professional connection, very professional relationship. Like I would sign on, we'd have a session for an hour and a half. It'd just be, hello, how are you? Then we'd just get into some of the spiritual concepts or things, problems I was having. And then, she would give good advice. But as I'm having these sessions, like one to ones, and then I'm also doing her classes, these spiritual attacks I'm having are getting more and more frequent. And also, they're getting more and more darker, they're getting quite intense. And at the time, I'm reading these attacks because I'm onto something. Oh, it's because of this knowledge, it's because of these techniques. It's trying to stop me. So I kind of persevered, I kept doing it. And I spoke at length at various podcasts, some of the situations I've been in, some of the things that have happened, and it all kind of ties together. I remember there was one podcast I did last year when I was talking about going to the Awake and Aware conference by Kerry Cassidy of Project Camelot last year. And even when I arrived at the hotel room before going to the conference, I had this really dark, quite horrific spiritual attack. and it was with me that whole weekend. And this ended up drawing me back to that same practitioner because I actually I'm going to have a bit of a break from having sessions. So I kind of didn't book in because before I was always booking in advance. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to see how things go, not seek her advice every single like 3 months. And then what happened? I had this really bad spiritual attack, and I couldn't clear it. Like all the techniques I had, all the things that I knew that would before generally would work, just weren't working. So I thought, well, okay, well, I need to book a session with her. So it drew me back to her, and this is why I think like everything's it's all connected, because I did generally try and ease off sort of seeing this person. Not because she did anything wrong, but just because I really need to stand on my own 2 feet. Yeah, I don't need to keep seeing someone every 3 months. But yeah, just inevitably, this attack drew me back to her, and then she was able to help clear me. But now, with perspective over the whole situation, I think it was that I was just being drawn back into her orbit again. So overall, again, I'm just continuing to see like these two practitioners for one-to-one sessions, and both facilitators are also doing their own classes. Sort of joining these two sets of classes again to involve meditations, healing, a lot of esoteric information to do with like soul fragments, their understanding. So a lot of downloads that they have about their understanding about reality. And again, they're very two different perspectives. They're both facilitators and they both know each other vaguely as well. And some of the people involved in these two sets of groups are also doing the other facilitators course as well. So there's a general vague kind of community going on here. But again, as I'm concentrating on physically healing, I'm going to see like a kinesiologist. I'm also having like regular sessions, these multidimensional healing sessions, and then I'm doing these various groups as well. It's still like these attacks are still getting more intense. And again, it's just getting darker and darker, the energies. And there'd be points sometimes where I feel dark, even when I'd be in the sea, that would really clear because like salt water really helps clear everything. And even when I'd been windsurfing, I didn't, dunked myself on the sea numerous times, I'd still feel this real darkness. And there's quite a lot of occasions, like towards the end of last year and also this year, where I felt like my life was in danger. It sounds a bit over the top, but yeah, I had a really bad feeling about a car crash, and there was just very strange situations in terms of like birds flying into my windows, birds flying into the kitchen windows, just just a lot of very strange, kind of quite dark synchronicities towards me having quite a bad accident. And then I think so that's kind of happening. And then again, this same sort of lady's helping to clear me. She's going, yeah, this is really dark. This is getting quite scary, but don't worry now, it's been cleared, blah, blah, blah. And it probably comes to about November of last year, 2024, my health having reached the peak. And I was like, wow, I'm really getting quite well now. It just suddenly took an immediate tumble, and it was really depressing. It was devastating. And I was like, I just can't believe I'm back in bed again. I'm in so much pain. I'm in my mid 40s. I'm living with my parents. And then just to really just make everything more chaotic, my nephew kind of moves into the house. There's no shade against him. He was going through his own things at the time, but I was initially fine with it, but it was just too much. I was in so much discomfort. I struggled even my parents being there, and I just wanted space because I was in just a really bad way. Physically, it was just a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain, but just sort of mentally, just trying to navigate this again. So when this all kind of kicked off, I ended up having a session with this same sort of younger healer, and which at the time I felt was helpful and things. Um, But still, like everything around me, it just feels depressing. It feels demoralizing. I can't believe I'm back here. This has been going on for like 4 or 5 years now. My life's been on hold in this never-ending cycle. And it was just at that point, if a comet just hurtles down towards Earth and destroys everything, I would quite welcome it. And I was just dreaming of the world ending. I was just so sick of it. I was just so sick of being in my body and just feeling constant pain and not being able to do anything about it. I'm just trying so much, like all the time. And then probably came to about December. And then randomly, I was just sort of sat there and just suddenly, in an instant, all these intense feelings just flooded in to do me and this healer, just this immediate download. And it completely took me by surprise. I was still like physically a complete mess. But now I had this like instant deep love connection, literally out of nowhere. It just happened in an instant. At the time, I was like, oh my God, this is like soul remembrance, you know? And I just saw it as this like really deeply spiritual thing. But like this time is even more crazy because like the first time, when I was in Brighton with that first initial girl, like, I'd met her, we'd have conversations, we'd been out together, we'd actually had physical like contact together. Like this person, I've only had sessions with her online. It was always in a really professional manner, like client relationship, like, hey, how are you? These are the problems, blah, blah, blah. Let's discuss it, la, la, la. So never any person who I know nothing about. I don't know her parents, don't know exactly where she lives in that country. Again, she's from a different country. So there's another level of synchronicity there as well. But yeah, over time, these feelings for her just grew and grew, and these kind of love connection just grew and grew, like even more powerful. Like the levels of love that I was feeling was 100 times bigger than that first girl. It was just like constant, but I was still bedridden, but I was just overwhelmed by the beauty of this connection that I was feeling. And again, it was incredibly sexual, like again, even more intense, even more powerful than the first time. And it was just overwhelming. And also, along with that, had this very deep telepathic connection with her. I felt like I could feel her sleep. I felt like when she was crying, I knew when she was out. I was just feeling all these things that she was doing in her life, or I thought I was feeling her. That's a big caveat to what's been going on. But again, everything was just so super intense, so super heightened. Um, and just from what I first felt from that first girl, again, everything was just intensified a million times. But again, I'm just still physically a mess. I'm just still not well. I'm in a lot of pain. But I became addicted to this love feeling. And it went on for months. I was feeling like this. There's nothing I could do. I didn't email her, tell her what was going on, didn't speak to her about it. I just basically just endured this connection. It was weird because I felt it, but still felt disconnected from it because, I'd never met this person physically. I didn't have any context for any of these feelings. They were just like, I felt it, but it had no grounding. So that was a weird aspect to it. It did make me think twice at the time, admittedly. But again, there was nothing to do. Wasn't physically in a state to start having conversations about this connection because I was just trying to get better again. So I'm joining these classes. It's more of like a lecture. So it's not like I'm participating. I'm just sort of listening. I've got my camera off. I'm just listening to her go through things. So I'm not mentioning anything. And I know she's got a partner. She's mentioned it numerous times. And again, I feel disconnected. I don't feel like jealous by that. It's just she's got a partner. But I also have this incredible feeling of love for her. Or I thought I did. But for the second time, I'm just like, this is wild because the age gap is massive. She's so young. I'm just like, I can't believe this is happening with someone of her age. She's like early 20s, I'm mid 40s. This just doesn't feel right. But at the same time, I have this bizarre, like intense, like what I feel is like love connection. So yeah, there's a lot of conflicting feelings and a lot of doubting as well. Um, which is good. Uh, and it was, I think, what happened then that really started to make me believe in the connection is that I started to. There's one point when I was at really just in a real low ebb, a lot of physical pain. I started to have like visions of me and her together, and even weirder, I had visions of her that with a child as well. So I had like her, having a baby. And then even stranger than that, I had this voice kind of come in, pretending to be my higher self, and it was going, "You will have a child with this girl." Um, so this is the start of like when my psychic abilities or abilities, what I thought abilities to talk to beings, really start to heighten as well. And I didn't know what to make of that, and it was crazy because again, my level ability to feel energies really started to heighten. And then this vision of this child that was given to me, I could then feel this child. It was there. It was like felt like it was in the top right hand of my sorry, top right of my energetic sphere. I could just feel this sort of baby. And then starting to have conversation with it as well. And this is another aspect to what was happening. I thought I was reaching this new whole level of spirituality. I was feeling energy. I was now able to talk to entities, and I was presuming these entities were good. And I know all this sounds really, really bizarre, but this is what happened, really. And I've, come from a person that's never really thought. I mean, I think everyone has a certain amount of psychic abilities, but I've never had anything quite like some other people maybe you see online, or if you had sessions with people. I've just always perceived myself being quite normal. But suddenly I've just got these deep mystic abilities out of nowhere in a really, really short a period of time, and it's kind of really, really mind blowing. And I'm sort of excited, but still, my general physical context, my health, where I'm living my whole life, is just falling to pieces. So yeah, it's like although this exciting thing is kind of going on, what I think is exciting, like everything else around me is just chaotic. So this is kind of going on for months. It all starts to bleed into each other. Like December, it's happening over Christmas, New Year, January, February. I'm still pretty much in bed a lot, in a lot of pain. But so my main focus really is just getting physically better again. But a lot of strange things are I'm still members of these spiritual groups because what I have to do is like log on Zoom and things. As I get better, I sort of contribute a bit more, actually speak. But a lot of the time, I was just sort of in the background. But I was also very aware that there was infighting starting to happen. Like people were dropping out. Weirdly, people being claiming that they were being spiritually attacked by one of the other practitioners. That was kind of happening. At the time, I didn't really believe it. I just thought, these were probably beings, trickster energies, pretending to be people, on purpose to cause infighting. And, what happened, people dropped out, but sort of split the group up in certain ways. I think this happens a lot. As soon as people start to come together in this way, in more of an esoteric way, that something trickstery happens, to try and cause infighting and try and break it up. But, some of these certain individuals, all lovely people, but they just sticking to their story that they're so sure that they're being attacked by this individual in their dreams. They're actually like a reptilian. They're out to sort of try and siphon off their, energy and things. So, I just in the back of my mind, I just think, no, I think there is something not great going on here, like in terms of energies, but I don't think it's this person. I think it's beings pretending to be this person just to cause havoc. So I'm just continuing on like February. And again, I'm just a bit vague now of like the actual timelines, but I think maybe February or March of this year. No, it's still happening. I'm still getting these. I'm just like, there are some days like it can go on for hours. I'm just sat in this amazing love bubble. I'm just laying there and just enjoying it. It's a weird feeling because, the rest of my body is just an absolute agony, but I've still got this like very pleasant, well, it's even more than pleasant. It's just divine thing of love. It's really hard to really describe in words the feeling. Really, really powerful. But again, I always sort of felt like detached from it because I'd never spoke to her about it. Still I kind of remained completely silent until I think there was one particular day. It just felt like because I assumed because I had this telepathic connection because of everything that had been going on, like, and the feelings that I felt, I assumed naively that she was feeling the same things. And I knew she had a partner and stuff. And I thought maybe she was remaining quiet due to that reasons. And she knew I was kind of ill. So maybe she thought maybe it wasn't a really appropriate time to be discussing this. But I assumed stupidly she was feeling exactly the same thing as me. Obviously, that turns out not to be the case. So there comes a point, I think, yeah, February or March, one of those 2 months where it feels like she's rejected the connection because again, I can feel what I think I can feel everything. I can feel when she's happy, when she's sad. It's like constantly feeling another human being, and I can't turn it off. It's always, always there as soon as I wake up. Um, so yeah, it just feels like she's like rejected the connection, she's going against it, and it feels like she's physically, spiritually attacking me. And it's actually getting quite bad. Like initially, I'm sort of dealing with it, goes on for a few hours, and it might feels like my heart's been squeezed, contorted. It's again very hard to describe in words, but it's quite horrific and it's getting quite scary. Like the sort of the power she has over me to be able to do this. At the time, that's what I thought. It's getting really quite painful, quite scary. So it's that at that point, due to the pain and the attacks, that I decided to reach out to her via email. So I kind of wrote this email going, really strange. I'm really sorry, but I've been having these quite extraordinary feelings for you since December. And I think I can't quite remember, but I was just like, I know you've got a partner, and I'm significantly older than you. Um, and yeah, I didn't really ask for this, blah, blah, blah. But, this is kind of what's happened. I'm not expecting anything, but please don't sort of spiritually attack me because it's really, really painful. But I think this email completely took her by surprise. She admitted at the time feeling a connection on a psychic sense, like I would maybe be important, but not to the level that I'd been feeling. She didn't have the same feelings or the telepathic feelings. I didn't really understand that until quite later on. We're emailing back and forth, and it was eventually we had like a Zoom call, and I just quite matter of fact explained what was going on, blah blah blah. But she's like, I haven't felt anything. I felt something, a connection tried to come in to try and come in between me and my partner. And again, she was accusing someone else of doing this, but again, I now think really it was some entity pretending to be that person, again, causing more havoc, more devastation, more sort of dividing energies. But she hadn't felt anything I'd been feeling because I was like, this kind of blew my mind because again, for months, it's like I was living in someone else's body. I could feel like very, very acutely everything that was happening to this person. And then suddenly to be told that that's not true, that I'm not, I was like, what the hell have I been feeling? What the hell's going on? This blew my mind. But, she was reiterating that I'm not looking for anyone because, I have a partner and happy. And I was like, yeah, absolutely fine. This is the weird thing about it. I was really detached. She was like, I'm not expecting anything, but still I have this like mad, like love connection. I'm not feeling any like jealousy toward this other person or anything like that. It's just, this is kind of what's going on. And it's just at this time, it's just this huge puzzle. And what ends up happening, we start really conversing a bit more closely. But I'm still having these quite powerful, what I feel like she's attacking me. So I'm still not completely sure if she's telling the truth or not because it feels so real. And admittedly, I do start lashing out because I start thinking she's actually doing this on purpose. I'm sort of begging her to stop, be like, why are you doing this to me? Because like some of the attacks were so severe, and even though I'm back in my mind and no, no, maybe this is some kind of trickster energy, it was still so real. It was still really hard to kind of come to that conclusion that she's not doing this. Is just all a simulation. So there's a few times that I lashed out in text messages and stuff. I was saying stuff like, "How can you do this? It's really unprofessional." Blah blah blah. But very kindly, very patiently, it's just like, "It's not me. It's really not me. I'm sorry." Um, and then I think eventually I just understood that it definitely wasn't her, that maybe everything I've been feeling there's a false aspect to it. I've been, um, somehow, I've been infiltrated. And so something is basically just creating this whole simulation. But again, maybe it'd be easier in the future if I write these down. Some of the attacks, they were so weird, like to do with like the heart, like felt like my heart was being pulled away from my chest and then stuffed down in the earth, just really weird actions. And I'm like, what the hell? It felt like someone was like really rejecting like the love of me and then just doing all they could to sort of like break my heart or something or just destroy their connection. That was what was clouding my thinking because I was like, no, this is her because she's like so good sort of psychically and spiritually. She's got all these amazing powers. She can do this, you know. I'm just sort of so clouded in my judgment by what's happening. So I immediately jump to conclusions that it definitely is her. But it's obviously not. It's something that's just causing this. So hats off to her really sort of patiently dealing with this, like just guy coming out of nowhere, telling her all this, and then accusing her of spiritually attacking, you know, when she's not doing anything. So kudos to her sort of remaining calm and just sort of talking me off down a ledge, you know. But it turned we, you know, we start to converse a bit more about what's going on. Um, you know, she starts to admit she's really been struggling with her own set of spiritual attacks and things. And I feel really bad for her, you know, what's been going on with her. Because you're very busy with everything. So, you know, it's like a new business. You're seeing clients, you're doing all of these classes, and you're dealing with all these spiritual attacks at the same time. And then you got this mad, like mid-40s guy emailing you, going, I've got this like love connections come out of nowhere. And then next I'm texting, they're going, stop spiritually attacking me. So, yeah, that's a lot to deal with. So that's kind of going on. And now I've started to come to the conclusion, okay, well, it's just we're just talking, you know, about some of the spiritual attacks that I'm having. So we're just having a good adult conversation about what's been going on. Again, I'm not expecting anything. I'm really detached from this, but I'm still feeling all these feelings. So it's a really, really odd situation to be in. But at this time as well, I'm really like my ability to feel energy is just coming into sort of dizzying levels. Like I'm feeling into places, I'm feeling into people, I'm feeling into concepts, into dates. You know, this is when I start kind of creating a lot of content on this channel and releasing videos about some of the things that I found. And it's just becoming more and more sophisticated as I kind of get more adept at it. And I'm learning really, really quickly. And I'm working out I'm able to call upon energy, like I can call upon key energy and it's just like there, or I can call upon organ energy and it's there, or prana energy and it's there. And I can basically command my body to do all these sort of things energetically. So I'm starting to think like I'm Neo, which is when like messianic energies sort of come into play as well. Um, where you're like being tricked into thinking you're special because you've got all these amazing abilities. And I'm giving myself like a Kundalini awakening, and it's just mind blowing. Like just how it just created this whole Kundalini awakening like simulation. I could feel this energy snaking around my body, this serpent like energy. It's just really, really elaborate. I mean, no one would really be able to understand quite how elaborate it was and what I was experiencing. So it's like, you know, a long, not only was I just in an absolute physical mess, I've got this false twin flame love connection. And then at the time, I thought, okay, well, at least I've got this feeling energy thing. This is hopefully genuine. Obviously, that turned out not to be the case. But at the time, I was still feeling hopeful. Um, and it just grew from there. Like my ability to feel instant energy was just extraordinary what I could feel. And I started to then feel into my own body. And I was feeling like all what I thought were all these like cords in my body, like portals in the room. I was thinking I was feeling portals opening up and they were sending entities through. I was feeling all these insertions of technologies. I could feel what I thought were latent toxins in my body, like remnants of cancer or like vaccinations. Um, I could could physically feel these cores of trauma actually had like felt like they had like name tags on it, you know, related to public speaking, like the fear of that, or like this relationship. There was this whole matrix of kind of technology in my body, etheric sort of spiritual technology, which I thought at the time was, you know, installed to stop you. It just felt like, you know, that scene in the Matrix where Neo wakes up and he's in that kind of weird sack of liquid from where the robots are basically siphoning off your energy. You're being used as a bat. It felt like that. It felt like I had all these cables in my body, etheric, energetic cables, and I was in this bubble. And that was what basically all of humans are in. They're in this sort of spiritual, energetic bubble with all these cables and this weird technology. And this is what's kind of siphoning their energy, causing all this chaos. So in my head at the time, it's like, no way, I can feel this. And at the time, again, my sophistication and be able to remove this technology started to grow. Initially, I could literally, if I tensed my body up and sort of squeezed, I could sort of basically pull these things off and they would then float out of my field. But I felt like I got more and more adept at doing it. And I was then just able to call upon energy and it would then just get rid of it. It would like, pull out these cords. It would dissolve this toxicity. Um, I mean, I was literally, this went on for weeks and I was even because I thought it was just a whole new thing. So I started to catalog this. So I was like writing down like, okay, there's this chord and there's these cores then attached to this other thing, and I was creating this whole index of what I thought were kind of spiritual technologies that were being used to keep humanity down. Because I was feeling it in my own body, and every day I was just peeling away another layer. And I was waking up the next day, and I thought, "Oh shit, they've installed more stuff in me." And I was then clearing it away. It was just going for hours and hours and hours. But at the time, I thought I was onto something. And obviously the attacks are sort of heightening as well. And I was like, well, they're trying to keep me down. So I'm clearing all this stuff. I'm onto them. Again, thinking I was Neo, sort of clearing all this stuff. And again, this just went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I wasn't sleeping because the attacks were happening. I was just busy, literally clearing myself night after night into the early hours of the morning. And I was then finally maybe done 5 in the morning and then sleeping and waking up about 10 o'clock, a few hours later, basically. And then the whole fucking thing would happen again. Um, but I thought, all this has a purpose. I'm going to come to the end of it at some point. I just got to keep clearing all this strange technology in my body. And again, I was just trying to use this ability. I started to feel into planets, like with the energy. I could feel, various areas of what I thought I was feeling into areas of the cosmos because I'm quite interested, on this channel to speak about Earth energies. And I've got a video coming out soon about an alignment in Chester that I found a while ago with all these sacred buildings and churches and stuff. And so I was feeling into these sacred places and I was feeling into the Duke of Westminster's estate. And I was feeling what I thought was like sexual magic energy there in the ley lines. And I then started to broaden that investigation. So I started feeling into some of the royal palaces. I was like, what does Buckingham Palace feel like? I then felt into Balmoral Castle, which is the royal family's Scottish residence, the royal family. And then suddenly something growled very deep and dark. And I was like, whoa, I backed away straight away from feeling. And then literally 3 minutes later, I felt like this signal like come into my field, really artificial signal, and it completely disabled all my abilities. And I felt like I was in this sticky ball. And it was really unpleasant because, if you get like really bad news and you get that cold, icy feeling on the back of your neck, it was like that, but times 20. It wasn't very pleasant at all. And it went on for days and days until it like finally started to clear. And again, I just assumed I was fighting the forces of darkness here. This is what I'm doing. And other instances occurred like this. It just wasn't just that. I had some other like, because I remember this is time I was clearing all this what I thought were attacks, and I was like, okay, what are the entities behind this? And so I started to feel into the entities that were behind these attacks. And I started firing energy, what I thought was energy. This sounds weird, doesn't it? But I thought I was firing energy at them. And then again, they started to sort of spiritually attack me even more. So I was in this like crazy madman simulation of energy, which at the time I thought was completely real. And like I said, it wasn't only segregated to feeling energy, like I was feeling into different planets, what I thought was my higher self. I was feeling to different types of DNA, dead relatives, and talking. I was conversing what I thought were dead relatives. Um, yeah, so it just all got very, very strange really, really quickly. And again, but I was still in like the worst physical health. I was still bedridden pretty much in quite a lot of pain. But all I did, I spent days and nights just feeding into energies, talking to beings, and dealing with what I thought were these spiritual attacks. That was my life for like a good number of months. And just like one day merged into another, and just it's wild what happened. So wild. And I thought I had a benevolent team of people that were showing me how to harness these abilities and energies. Because there was one particular night, this is when I sort of what thought I was learning how to like uncable myself from all these insertions and cords and other stuff that had been stored in my body energetically to, hold me down. I thought like one night I was being shown how to clear myself because I was lying there and something was like, I could see and I could feel it. I had my eyes closed. I could feel cords being unraveled, insertions being taken out of my heart, like all of these things. And then I felt like I had this aura that was really massive, but it had all these plates on. I felt this being lift all these plates off my aura. I thought at the time, I was lying there in complete awe, going, "No way, this is like some amazing spiritual guides showing me how to use this ability." And I was just laying there in absolute awe, just witnessing this thing work, thinking it was for my benefit. Like this is a whole new layer of like spirituality and spiritual power. And this is going to change like me and, from this point forward. It's so elaborate how elaborate this I can't begin to describe how elaborate it was. And again, this like ability to call upon energy just got more and more heightened where I felt like I had, because some of these meditation groups, they were sort of talking about plasma energies and these other energies. It felt like I could call upon these energies. And so I could, this energy, you clear that cord from my body. This energy, you go into the earth and clear that sex magic energy out. Like it felt, I guess, on a par of like, the whole idea of having an AI agent where you just give it a prompt to do something and then it will do something like, open Word document, oh, sorry, open Excel, create a table with these columns and this. It was kind of like that, but with energy. So that's what I thought was going on. I was able to just call upon these energies and they were like agents and they would just carry it out for me. Because before, like when I was clearing these cords, it felt like I had to sort of squeeze my body, my physicality to kind of pull stuff out. But then by this point, I was just calling upon these energies to do it for me. That's what I thought. And again, it felt so viscerally real. Like I could see it in my mind's eye. I could feel it happening in my body. This is the crazy thing. This is why I was so sucked in by it, because it was so elaborate and it was so real. But even with, the very elaborate pyrotechnics and the light show, things were getting worse. Like the attacks were getting worse. Um, I think probably quite a few number of weeks in, if not months, I don't know. So it's all kind of January, February, March, April, it all sort of merges, and May, it all kind of merges into one big period of time. It's quite hard to sort of decipher what happened when. Um, but I did start to get the inkling something was really wrong because this can't go on like this. I was literally spending most of the day just clearing, 6, 8 hours clearing myself. It turned out this elaborate game. And then I realized that I actually had this big energetic bubble, which at the time I could sort of basically pull off my whole body. And this bubble was simulating everything I was feeling. It was simulating all these chords. It was simulating all these insertions. It was simulating all these weird technologies and like viruses that I felt I could feel or toxicities I could feel on my body. It was simulating all of this. And then I was like, no way, I've just been living in a simulation. As at that point, I was like, something's seriously wrong. Like, not with this ability to feel energy, but just this new ability to call upon energy, but just also this love connection. It's all connected. Like everything. It's just this big, I've just been infiltrated on a humongous level. Like, I've just been living this complete simulation, been completely taken in by it. Because it plays into sort of codependency, like the idea of having this amazing relationship, which obviously like everyone wants in life. They want like an amazing love, don't they? They want to help the world. So it's when you get these messianic energies kind of come in, I'm going to help the world with these new found abilities. It just played into all of those traumas I had really fucking successfully. But I just can't begin to convey how crazily elaborate it all was and how long it took. I guess few months. It didn't take me too long to kind of come to, but there's no way I could carry on living 6 months like that in this weird simulation, just like this constant made up spiritual attacks because I'm living in this weird simulated bubble. But it was at that point I was like, I have to get clear of everything. I have to get clear of this girl, the techniques. I have to get clear of. I'm not saying all the techniques are connected to. I don't know how it all connects. I just wanted to get clear of everything. I wanted to get clear of just the whole thing. And then I just had to sort of send a message. I'm really sorry. I'm just going to have to completely stop going to these classes because this is. I've kind of realised I'm being so infiltrated. It's all kind of connected. And this could be another level of, I guess, sort of division, because I'm never going to point a finger at her because it's not her fault, It's something else outside of that that's kind of causing all this chaos. But at the same time, I need to just clear myself of all spiritual groups. So I dropped out of all of them, the two that I was part of. And then I was just trying to clear my body as much as possible and just not do the same techniques I did before and like feeding into energy. I just completely rejected all of it because I was like, it's all compromised. I've just been in this complete game, this rat race for like, how long of it was. I'm still in excruciating pain. And as I start to try and leave this connection, trying to leave this, simulated bubble of energy and reject it all and try uninstall all these things from my body and just try and block it out of my mind. Because that was another thing. It was a mental battle. I had to really concentrate and not think about her, not think about techniques, not think about, feeding into energy, anything spiritual. I had to stop, I had to just completely block it out because it would just invite it all back in again. But as I was trying to do that, like the attacks got even worse. So it was like making me feel really, really sick. And it was just low level torture, like all night. So it wouldn't allow me to sleep. It's making me feel sick, giving me really horrific, intense headaches. I'm not the sort of person that gets headaches or migraines, but I just had excruciating headaches. Something pulling on my teeth was a weird one, pulling on my teeth all the time. And then I had one, again, this is another quite scary. It felt like something was trying to pull. It sounds a bit dramatic again, but literally it felt like something was trying to pull my soul out of my body, into some kind of nether region, really dark. Um, and the only reason why I thought maybe I was in danger because my mum had some kind of quite horrific dream when this was happening. And she knocked on my door like really frantically the next morning, go, "You're right, you're right, you're right." I was like, no, had a really bad spiritual because although she's a Christian, she sort of understands that kind of world to a degree, so I can talk to her on that level. But I think something was quite scary was actually going on as I was trying to get clear of it. Um, so I'm in this situation where all the techniques that I usually use to clear myself of entities or bad energies, I feel all compromised, or I don't know what is true or right. This is why I'm in this being in such a pessimistic state for a while in terms of like spiritually, just the world, because it's really just rocked my foundation. Because I don't know, I've got no compass of like what's north and what's south because everything just felt like it was a lie. And so, like the beginning of like the spiritual journey, the idea you'd like, oh, declare yourself, you call upon Jesus or Archangel Michael or any of these angels or sort of higher ascending masters. I'd actually, for quite a long time, I've eased away from that because I don't really know what these entities are. If I'm being honest, I've never really been able to feel what God is or Jesus. I'd never felt that. So it's hard for me to call upon it. But I had no other choice. So I started calling upon like Archangel Michael or God, or just because I didn't know who else to turn to, I even asked my mum to sort of pray over me, to try and help clear it, to stop it. But I just felt like I was being stalked, which is never ending, day in, day out, night. I wasn't being able to sleep. It was just like low level torture, like all night. I couldn't clear it. I just felt so compromised in so many ways. Nothing seemed to work. I couldn't call upon anything to clear it. This is the weird thing. Like people say, oh, you call upon this name of Jesus Christ, it will go straight away. Never worked. Never worked. Any of these beings. I called upon them over and over again. Still there. Still in this, yeah, shitty simulated energy bubble. But it was a real battle for my own consciousness. Again, I had to really not think about anything to do with this scenario or this girl, just because it just brought it all back. It just set everything off, like all the energies with it, the love connection, just the whole thing. Yeah, because it was quite distressing and weird, but it felt like there was this. I could feel this bubble of energy in the back of my mind, the left hand side back of my mind. I can still feel it till now to a degree, and it felt like it was surveilling my thoughts. I know this makes me sound a bit mad, but it was literally manifesting. I don't know, like whatever this insertion or spiritual technology where it was able to carry out this simulation, like it felt like that was a central point of its surveillance, being able to sort of see what I was thinking and then react to it in a way in this simulation. Still feel like I've got remnants of it now. And that was the reason why it sounds really weird, but I had to keep my consciousness at the front of my head, on my forehead, pretty much like my focus it there. Because if my consciousness slipped to the back, that's when it went into Wonderland. That's when it went to like this simulated weird reality of love and weird reality of like energy bubbles and just oddness. And it was for weeks. I was just constantly keeping my consciousness, and it's really hard to keep doing that all day and night because you relax and you're conscious. It's weird. I never really thought about it before. But if you relax, your consciousness floats towards the back. And so I was constantly on my guard, having to make sure that my thinking was at the front of my. It sounds really weird, but this is the level of like what I was having to deal with. You're like, don't let my consciousness go to the back to this weird bubble, energy bubble, because that's when it's just everything. The whole thing just kind of sets off because it felt like I had all these technologies in this bubble that was this whole like simulation of like chords and insertions and these weird energies that I could call upon. It was all part of that. So I just wanted to stay out of it as much as possible, and it just meant keeping my consciousness at the front of my head. I know it sounds weird, but that's how it felt. So it just at the time I was really didn't know what else to do. It was feeling really, really quite dark, sort of demonic energies floating around me. And I'm still being given low level torture, like not being able to sleep. So it just felt like I had to try and get outside help. So I sort of trawled the internet. I've just found a random guy in America who dealt with like demonic clearances, and luckily, at the time, he sort of got back to me quite quickly. And this is the weird thing, because if you do a bit of searching on, demonic clearances for the body or the house, there's a lot of people out there doing it. They're charging serious money. And again, I was just really vulnerable at the time. I just wanted to get rid of this stuff. So he didn't really have reviews. I can't, I think just because he got back to me really quickly. I think that's why I just went along with it. And it did cost quite a lot of money. And I'm not sure if I was ripped off. I mean, I think he did help because definitely I felt clearer. And there was like, after he'd finished, I was able then to sleep, which is good. Yeah, I'm not quite sure if he was a completely genuine person because he did try to get me to pay more money. So I paid for my clearing my own body, then the clearing of the house, and it did definitely help, I think. But he was saying, "Oh, there's more coming back," and so I think he was trying to get more money out of me. And he was like, "What's going on? These things keep coming back. I clear and they come back again." And I just ended up just sending quite a long email, just explaining the whole situation at that point. And I think because he comes from quite a religious Christian background and traditions, I think I freaked him out, and I never really heard from him again. Because I assumed he thought I was evoking demons or something. So he obviously didn't want to get involved. But yeah, it's a bit of a grey area because if you do a little bit of research on the internet, do with like demonic clearance, some people are charging extraordinary amounts of money. And if you're in the same situation like me, you're just in a really vulnerable state because you just want it to end. So you will just literally pay whatever just to get it to stop. And I was definitely in that situation. So I felt maybe a little bit taken advantage of, if I'm being honest. But again, at least I can sleep. And if I'm careful with my thoughts, I had to be really careful not to think about any of this because it's invited it all back in. So I had to really, really kind of be vigilant with the way I thought and just try and keep my mind off it. And then I just started to try and have sessions with other healers to really get on top of what had happened. And that's when I started to, look into QHHT and have a couple of sessions with those, with two separate different types of practitioners. And then so far it's been massively helpful. Like the first one was good in certain ways. Like I had all these visualizations of potential past lives and stuff. But the second one's been particularly powerful. And it's like with a couple of people I'm definitely going to go back to on occasion. In fact, I've got a session with them next week. So they've been really, really helpful. But I probably will do a separate podcast on that because there's a lot more information to kind of do with that. But as the months have gone on, like I was still really experiencing this low level torture. It was just like, again, it was making me feel sick, giving me headaches, like pulling at my teeth was a really weird one. Just the whole, just stopping me sleep and just affect my overall wellness levels. And that's gradually faded over time. It comes in a little bit every now and again. I'm not completely clear of it, but definitely, I'm 100% better. So my own personal experience now, like the whole idea of twin flames, is that I do maybe come to the conclusion maybe the majority of scenarios aren't as positive as people think, and maybe it is some kind of orchestrated alien love bite. I'm not necessarily saying it's an alien, but I think there is something that's happening spiritually that's not quite right. That's maybe not in your highest good. And yeah, I guess this brings me back to the sort of the current book I've just finished reading, The Alien Love Bite, which was popularized by author Eve Lorgan. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And yeah, the book in question is Alien Love Bite, Alien Interference in Human Love. And I guess it's like, again, the language to do with alien denoting sort of beings from other planets. How would you describe what is the source of it? Maybe it can't be pinned down to one particular entity. It could be like interdimensional or astral beings, or even forces that already live within Earth, so terrestrial forces. I think it's quite a complicated picture, though. I guess, yeah, give me a bit more time. I'll have more clarity on it. But it does seem, actually, reading her book, that it's not just only a negative spiritual situation. It's actually been harnessed by various covert human groups have weirdly been manipulating people's relationships. Uh, so yeah, not only maybe in combination with ETs or interdimensionals or some kind of beings, but maybe on their own as well. They've got their own strange kind of alien love bite unit, and it's just like, why would they do that? I just The conclusion I've come to is they're just sort of testing to sort of see what's possible, maybe. And I also started to really consider how this actually plays into the whole hybrid agenda. It's something I've like, looked into very early days of conspiracy, the idea of like hybrid humans and potential ETs or whoever like manipulating human DNA, mixing it with other species, whether they be alien or animal, whatever. And then you heard those stories about, greys sort of creating alien human hybrids. And there's two schools of thought where it's basically a way to infiltrate human society, because these greys, they basically just evolve themselves out of emotions, out of a soul. So it's just a way for them to kind of get back on track with some kind of ascension path. And then there's the other school of thought where no, it's just complete manipulation, domination. That's just a an excuse for what actually they want to do, which is to dominate Earth and sort of take it over with these hybrids. So there's two very different schools of thought on this whole topic. But Eve's written two books on this topic. And she's got lots of interview. I've only just started listening. I'm on my second interview at the moment. So I've only really read the first book, and it's very much from like the whole idea from an ET perspective. And bearing in mind, she did write this book a while ago, and so it's a lot of this is an alien problem. This is to do with the greys. It's like being physically abducted early on, and they're all part of some hybridization program. But yeah, a little bit of background about Eve herself. She's actually a counselor and hypnotherapist and has been, working a very long time since the 90s, but in very kind of quite esoteric areas to do with mind labs and mind control victims and SRA victims. And so, yeah, but a lot of her initial writing, this Alien Love Bite book, which really kind of popularized the whole topic, she's sort of seeing it from an ET point of view. But I have questions about, whether that, because it felt always to me, it felt more of like an astral thing, like a demonic thing, like spiritual entities. But I could be wrong. And it's just one of these things like this, the concept of life, there are so many different labels. Could we all be like have multiple labels for the same thing? It's just a language, a semantics thing. But a lot of her in this book, she's has lots of case studies of various clients she's seen, but then also just case studies from other researchers have kind of come across, and a lot of her that initial books to do with like physical aliens, basically abducting people. But it has made me think, due to the level of manipulation that I've experienced, how was I infiltrated? Is I mean, it sounds a bit grand, and I'm wary that I'm not getting carried away. But this whole idea abduction, am I a victim of that? And do I have maybe certain things that have been inserted in me to make it more likely for this kind of weird energy simulation, fake love connection to be fired off whenever they like? So there's something I've been grappling with. And if I look back, it's particularly in my early 20s, I had a lot of sleep paralysis. It's weird. I remember having quite a lot of instances of sleep paralysis where I'd feel like there was someone in the room and I was like pinned down. And that's always been a particular signal of abductions, apparently. And there's been lots of periods of me having that. I haven't had that for a very long time. I think probably stopped in my 30s. I don't recall having anything since. But yeah, then in my 20s, I wasn't spiritual at all. I wasn't into meditation and stuff, and I was, quite hedonistic in many sort of ways. I used to run, so I used to sort of generally try and look after my health, and I used to eat relatively well. Maybe drank a little bit too much and stuff, but yeah, I wasn't spiritual at all. But I would have like sleep paralysis quite a lot, and it makes me think because a lot of these, when you read this book, it's very much, how far does this go back, like manipulation and especially in respect to my mum, she's always struggled with like psychic attacks and has very, very poor mental health. So I'm just, really wondering, it could be nothing, but I'm just really wondering is there deep in the manipulation within my family? But again, maybe I'm just reading too much, and because I'm reading this book and I'm just, getting overly paranoid and stuff. But I think it's important maybe to explore it because this infiltration has been so out there. I'm just trying to look for answers because obviously I don't want it to happen again. I really don't want that to happen again because it's like I don't. There's no foundation for me to know what's true because your whole intuition is completely compromised and taken over. My feet ability to feel. I can still feel energy now, but I don't know what I'm feeling sometimes is true or not. Whether it's again as a weird like false manifestation. I just don't know. I don't have a at the moment. I don't have a foundation of like what's true. It's because I'm still yeah, just still very distrustful of my own body and everything I'm feeling and everything I experience it. Because it's just like the level of sophistication of the simulation that I was feeling is so wild. Like, unless you'd experienced it, the trickster energies, it makes me feel like, maybe have some kind of animation just to give people an idea what it felt like, what it looked like. But it was even going back to that guy in the US that I paid sizable amount of money to clear these entities from the house and myself. When I thought he was energetically working on me, clearing my body, I could thought I was lying there and I thought I could feel him pulling out all my energy bodies because he was like pulling these energy bodies out and he was stretching it, and I felt like holes were being made in my energetic field, and then all these like entities were falling out. I felt all this really viscerally in my body. It felt really, really real. It felt like they were opening doors in my aura, and again, more stuff and more technology was kind of coming out. And I realized that, when this was happening, it wasn't real because he sent me quite a long message and saying that he'd finished and all the results. And I got that email or that text, I can't quite remember, while this simulation was going on. I was like, ah, God, it's that bloody simulation again. Because it was surveilling all my thoughts and knew what was happening. It was just playing out this false role of this energetic theatre, making me pretend that I was feeling him working on me when it wasn't. It's so messed up. It's so messed up. And this kept happening. Because I mentioned that situation where, I thought I had this team of loving beings showing me how to use all these energies. And I had this elaborate, again, simulation of someone showing me how to, untie myself, all these cords and all these insertions and all these etheric technologies. I had this elaborate simulation that went on literally all night and I was in awe. I thought I had beings come to me and sort of tell me very lovingly, lie down, we're going to help you. And again, creating this, elaborate energetic theatre. And I thought they were clearing my energetics away, clearing my physical body. But actually, what they were doing, they were installing more of these energetic insertions. And again, it just it hyped up the low level torture. It started to make me feel sick. It was giving me headaches. I was like, oh my God. It's so sadistic what was happening. And then what they were trying to get me to think. It's only no wonder, like, I'm surprised I didn't commit suicide because I had I never would, but I had really, like, heavy physical symptoms anyway, so I was, in a lot of pain, and I was then dealing with these, like, crazy spiritual attacks. And this is kind of why I wanted some huge natural disaster just to swallow up the earth, just so it would just, end this madness that no one understood or how to deal with. It was really isolating. But I'm just again at the end of this now, just with these wider questions of the story, why try to trick me into loving this particular person? Again, there's all these synchronicities, which I kind of won't go into because it'll probably give too much away personal information. But there was similarities with the first individual and then the second individual. This happened with this love connection. There's all these weird synchronicities about where they came from, their ages, all this stuff. It's just really bizarre. What does that mean? And again, maybe there are genuine twin flames out there. I don't know. But I would probably argue, probably the majority of them, like this whole what they call chaser, runaway. I can't remember the dynamic now, but you have like one person who's really into the connection and the other person sort of running away because it's like a traumatic thing. A lot of people set that up as being completely normal spiritual thing that happens, but I'm starting to argue, no, 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 this is a complete manipulation. That's an alien love bite thing more than anything. Um, and again, it's a big question. Why are they preying on normal people? And again, I'm not a famous politician. I'm not a famous actor, musician. Being very isolated due to my health and the path that I've taken. Dropped out a lot of my friendship groups because I haven't been around physically for a long time. And there's no one really I can sort of talk at depth with this sort of thing, apart from like the QHHT therapist people, because you can't weird them out because they've heard and seen everything really. So they're the only people I can really sort of get deep into. And I guess like speaking now as well, it's very cathartic because I know I can say whatever I want. It doesn't matter. I'm just talking to the abyss. But it's been quite healing in its own right, just writing all this down and stuff. And I think it's important for me to maybe, properly write this down and what happened more in depth in an article or something. But, going back to the book and the manipulation and sort of Eve's book, the Alien Love Bite book, a lot of the stories are to do with normal people, but there is one particular story involving a famous politician or global leader, and he's being driven in a sort of chauffeur-driven car. He's got two bodyguards with him, and all of them in this car witness this woman floating midair from her home. I think it's from an apartment block or something, and they get freaked out. And then what happens? Apparently, the VIP and the bodyguards. This is a very condensed version. The VIP and the bodyguards get state or covert sanctions given clearance to investigate what happened because of what they saw. And obviously, they're credible sources. And so they kidnap this woman, interrogate her to get more information because they're sort of thinking it's some strange, like Russian energy weapon or something. Maybe she's some kind of weird spy like technology, or they have an inkling maybe it's connected to ETs and actually think she's an ET and herself, like just incognito in pretending to be a human. So they interrogate her to try and get information. But it turns out all the individuals involved in the story have been abducted. And this strange love bite scenario then plays out between this one woman and then two of the bodyguards. Both of the bodyguards then start to love this woman because the aliens during this abduction they found out had bonded their auras in some way to sort of create this connection. And then the VIP, like global leader individual, he never really divulged who this is. I assume it's someone famous, was then bonded to the son of this woman, but in a grandfatherly way, not a romantic way. It's just a wild like manipulation of all these people. Just so weird. And a lot of similar case studies in Eve's books, particularly mean these two women, where it feels like, without a doubt, I've had a stronger, what I felt like has been a stronger love and sex connection than the other individual. And it feels that's on purpose. They manipulate in some way people's energetics. So the heart information flows one way but doesn't go the other. So one person will be deeply in love, but the other person's not feeling it because it's not being reciprocated. So this is why it causes the chaos. So it's obviously really sophisticated spiritual technology that we don't have, or we do have, but it's being messed around with in covert circles potentially. I don't know. It knows, they know how to bond people to each other. There's a whole science behind it potentially, and this is what's been happening. Like people are being tested out with this thing, but then it's just like, why are they doing that? Yeah, again, potentially from an etheric, spiritual point of view. Again, it could be food. It could be like matrix style situation where you have entities just literally feeding off stuff. The energy that's created from the love, from the sexual stuff. This is what's come up in the QHHT things. You had entities basically feeding, as I'm feeling this really heightened levels of sexual arousal and just literal felt like full body orgasms. Like you've got some entity basically just siphoning off the energy. Which is not a very nice thought at all. But again, it's like what I've really started to think is like, how far back does this go in my lineage? No, it's a larger narrative to this. Is there like an end game to this? What's the point of this whole grand experiment? And particular AI at the moment is going to sound a bit of a curveball aspect to the concept, but AI is quite a prevalent thing at the moment. It's really coming into the public sphere. Like I sort of, again, because I was able to feel into energy, I was feeling into it. I was feeling into Chat GPT. I was feeling into AI. I was feeling all this love, and I was like, no, okay, that completely changed my opinion of AI. Then I thought, oh, this is a loving being to help humanity. I feel into it now. I don't feel anything. So again, it was a complete simulated feeling. So weirdly, I don't know, how does AI play into this? Because particularly in respect to them, this is just complete speculation, but the whole idea of grey aliens have always, people talk about they're very artificial, or the idea of PLS, program life, what is it, PLF, programmable life forms, I think it is. How much of this, like this whole like hybridization or is abductions, has an AI element to it. These are quite grand concepts, but the idea maybe AI, ancient AI demiurge that's kind of in our reality that's kind of pushing this. Maybe they're experimenting with human emotion, see how it works to try and manipulate it and try and replicate their own, but an artificial version. I don't know. This is something I've been, again, just theorizing in my own head. Does AI play into this story? I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, a lot to think about. So, didn't quite plan it going on this long, this podcast. But anyway, I think it's been very cathartic. So that's what's been going on in my world, really. It's a lot. It's weird because even though I was sort of confined to my bed for a number of months, spiritually and energetically, like a lot was happening. I'm definitely feeling a bit older and a bit wiser. So yeah, I'm still really decompressing, still researching what's going on with this. Again, I might create more content, more coherent content rather than me rambling at a sort of later date. But overall, I've filmed one kind of vlog style video around Chester to do some of the sacred sites around there and talking about what I'm calling the Afrin line, I think it is. It's like a weird Welsh water goddess. But I initially called it the Minerva line, but I want to move away from the Roman connotations. And so I'm changing the name of it because I can. So yeah, that's coming out. I've just sort of got the narration, got all the clips. I just need to edit it together. So that's coming. And like I mentioned before, also, I'm just doing a lot more short form content. So check that out. That's going to be on YouTube and Instagram. There was on Instagram, but yeah, TikTok seemed to be getting a lot of love, which is good. So for now, something a little bit different. I'm going to merge myself into the audio video I released a few weeks ago, just to cheer you up, just to put a smile on your face. The whole idea of end times prophecy is just to give an indication of where my mind has been at these days. When's it going to end? Please let it end. But yeah, the question about end times, disaster scenarios, whether, again, what would be more of a spiritual thing, like a transition, like a portal, like a spiritual thing, and it gets quite comical when you go through the list of possibilities. Could like nuclear war, Armageddon, like, huge earth changes of solar flashes and polar shifts. It's just so much to contend with. Crazy. But I'm going to hand over to myself. It has been great as always, and I hope to see you again at the next one. Till next time, please do subscribe to YouTube and Rumble and whatever podcast platform you use. And I'll catch you at the next one. Take care. Bye. The end is nigh, the end of the world, the destruction of all we know. Are we experiencing a sudden seismic shift of human society from a sense of illusionary stability to all-out chaos and destruction? Or perhaps will the apocalypse unfold as a seemingly spiritual transition from one-dimensional reality to another? A mass harvesting of souls, the final act, the ending scene of Maya. If you inhabit the online conspiritual space, it's very likely you've come across the idea that we are in the end times, the timeline to global finality. It's definitely crossed my mind. These final mechanisms to bring about such huge upheaval and change are in some ways comically numerous. Solar flashes, dramatic catastrophic earth changes, climate, nuclear war, alien invasion, devastating comets or asteroids, or the coming of a messianic figure. Or from a more spiritual angle, does the earth simply reset, like clockwork, as it always has, into a new paradigm, a new way of being? There are some that say resets and cataclysms have happened more recently than we realise. This ties into ideas of Tartaria, mudfloods, resets, and lost advanced civilizations, spiritual understanding, and technical knowledge. Only breadcrumbs of these civilizations can be uncovered around the world in select architecture. The theory perpetuates that we are in a state of amnesia, and that timelines of history are completely devoid of actual reality and merit. But if the official timeline of history is to be believed, there have been other pronounced periods when people have thought global destruction was around the corner. Similar to the year 2000, the year 1000 saw many in medieval Europe, due to various religious scriptures and millennial expectations and anxieties, experienced increased fear and panic across various Christian-focused realms. Pope Innocent III, whose papacy lasted from 1198 to 1216, claimed the return of Jesus would occur 666 years after the rise of Islam, placing it roughly in 1284, which again caused widespread end times anxiety. A well-respected German astrologer, on the basis of a particular astrological alignment, predicted a huge catastrophic flood would destroy the world as they knew it in 1524. His prediction caused widespread fear and panic. Riots broke out with heavy fatalities. Many early preppers of the time tried to prepare by building arks. On a slightly lighter note, in 1806, it was reported that in Leeds in the north of England, a hen had laid an egg with the phrase, "Christ is coming." Hilariously, religious fear spread throughout the land until it was revealed that the inscribed egg was actually a complete hoax. Fast forward a few centuries, apart from the Y2K millennium bug, which predicted vast technology shutdowns due to the lack of computational 4-digit support for the date 2000, there stood the 2012 Mayan calendar narrative, with 2012 denoting the end of the calendar and thus the world as we know it. But many highlight that maybe this 2012 Mayan date was a shift in consciousness or timelines, rather than a visceral destruction of materiality. So this is a brief skip through some previous examples of historical end times accounts. Again, this is based on traditional timelines and dates, if they are to be believed. So why is now different from these examples in history? Well, I guess there is so much more data that could be argued to support the end times hypothesis. You could view such a devastating process from many different perspectives, with the sole physical reset of civilization occurring due to its destruction. Or maybe could a spiritual split, a harvesting of souls, be the result of the end of the world? But also it could be an entirely spiritual process, where people or souls are harvested, moved and transformed to where they need to go next, completely painlessly. Or perhaps nothing happens and it was all a very highly sophisticated LARP, live action roleplay, orchestrated on the human, energetic and spiritual levels to keep humanity trapped and cycling through the same challenges and feeding off the negative energies. The very word apocalypse comes from the Greek word apocalypsis, which literally means revelation, disclosure, or the lifting of the veil, and so not necessarily depicting absolute physical destruction. Without a doubt, as always, the waters are murky and very confusing when viewing these grand concepts. There is always unfortunately a hidden hand sowing disinformation and faulty ideas in an attempt to bamboozle people like you and me. We simply just want to know the truth and react accordingly for the betterment of ourselves, our families, and the wider community. All of the noise makes it impossible to decode and understand how things will unravel in the future. One aspect of this unfortunate direct manipulation of the truth in the human experience from a very personal perspective occurred for me towards the beginning of this year. At the time, I felt my ability to sense energy was really starting to heighten to levels I'd never felt before. I even made a video explaining my experiences, not knowing the full implications of what was happening around me at the time. I was able to feel into the months and years, sensing the energy. As 2025 progressed, the energy became more and more intense, to the point that in November and December I was getting a headache. For me, it pointed towards something big and painful happening towards the end of the year for the collective. Then, in 2026, the energy changed very rapidly. It felt very loving and peaceful, but coming towards Easter 2026, everything stopped. There was no energy to read. Later on, feeling into it again, this definitive hard stop whatever it was, shifted into June, away from Easter. I wondered, what was this complete ending of energy? Feeding into 2027, 2028, there was still nothing. But after a very turbulent time of relentless, intense spiritual attacks, it started to become clear that maybe this ability to feel into energy wasn't as genuine or positive as I first thought. As strange as it sounds, I realised I'd been living in a form of artificial energy simulation. The big question is, how much of the data I was feeling into was actually still true? Was all of it an artificial construction that maybe should be completely ignored? Or was it a temporary heightening of something genuine? I still don't know. Apart from really shattering my belief system, it made me realise how easy it is to be infiltrated. It made me wonder about people who have prophetic visions, dreams, channeling information, or maybe technology in their head connected to ETs. How much of it is genuine, true, and not trickster energies playing havoc to derail us and humanity? It has been a very sobering experience. What can we really trust? I'm not completely ruling out everything, but I'm definitely more cautious than I ever have been when it comes to information like this, because it's important to be mindful when approaching these grand concepts, and maybe where the distortions could be coming from. So far, 2025 has been a very personal apocalypse. This is another interesting point. These destructive, transformative energies could be on a completely personal level, more than an external environment and collective event. Due to the energies, it might be that there is no way to hide from hidden or shadow aspects of yourself. The only way to push forward and through is to be absolutely authentic in every way, to reach the other side. Any deviation from this authenticity and healing could cause real pain and friction. It's easy to see on a human level people feeding disinformation into the collective, but could this also be operating on the etheric and spiritual dimensions? Because even when energies and beings feel good, how do you truly know you are not being deceived in some way? No one really does, no matter how discerning they think they are being. This is what I've realised and experienced this year, unfortunately. So, all of the information I present today, and in fact the reality around us, I advise you not to walk around in a constant state of suspicion, but also don't get attached to other people's narratives or information. Be curious, but don't let one system or person or group become your whole belief system. This has been a big lesson for me in 2025. Now, more than ever, I think people need to look within and find answers. But I can sympathise, this route of going within is so difficult sometimes. Having said that, going completely against my own advice, let's look externally at things and find some correlation and answers. Ross Coulthard. The new modern disclosure movement for me personally seems to be framing disclosure as a warning threat narrative. It ignores all that has come before, all the data, whistleblowers and experiences. Investigative journalist Ross Coulthard, who is part of News Nation, is very much ingrained with this new movement for disclosure. Here's what he had to say about future events and the people he has spoken to.
That leads me to ask, there's been so much discussion of this date, 2027, and where the source of the information comes from, we don't know, but there have been some prominent spokespeople who have been involved with the UFO topic that have spoken about this date. Do you know if there's any validity to that source of that information? And if so, what is your interpretation of that date, if it means anything?
There's certainly something going to happen in 2027, and I don't know what it is.
Okay.
I've also heard 2034, and I've also heard other dates, much later. But depends who you talk to. Some people say it's a pole reversal. Some people say it's an asteroid hitting the planet. Some people say it's AI reaching quantum, and then all of a sudden we lose the capacity to have control of our own computer systems. I have no idea. What I am aware of is that everybody's telling me we're on borrowed time. And I cannot begin to emphasize how serious a look I get when I say to people who are confiding in me, what's the timescale on this? And they're urging me to be urgent. They're saying to me, people need the right to know this. They have a right to know this. And I'm going, well, what are we talking about? And I feel like shaking these people and saying, for God's sake, just bloody tell me. And they are all constrained by their national security oaths. They want the public to know this. And this is why the President Trump, has a unique ability to literally flick a switch and force this to be revealed. And look, that might still happen.
So from the mouths of these government contractors and insiders, this is as close as we're going to get concerning the government's opinion on the end times. Is there 100% truth in what is being told? Half truth or zero truth? Chris Bledsoe, the White Lady. Chris Bledsoe has gained much traction on the scene recently as an experiencer with a very fascinating story. Starting roughly back in 2007 with a young family and strong Christian beliefs, Chris has experienced financial hardships due to severe Crohn's disease. On a fishing trip, 3 large orbs appeared in the sky and took him away for an estimated 4 hours. When he returned, he realised he'd been healed. After this, Chris experienced constant strange activity around him, orbs and other strange encounters, including miraculous healings of people connected to him. He felt compelled to tell his story, but found it an uphill struggle when talking to the nuts and bolts aspects of the UFO community. He was also widely ostracised by his previous church community for dabbling with negative entities and demonic energies. Around 2012, during a deep period of depression, he was visited by a glowing, luminous feminine figure, whom he named the White Lady. She gave him an object, shaped like a pack of sausages, about a foot long and furry. Very strange. The lady told him he must communicate his story to people. He had to let people know that humanity would also have to contend with a huge deception and encourage people to align with good over evil. Her message was deeply rooted in spiritual challenges and that people need to concentrate on faith, healing, and positive personal transformation. There was no real mention of the specifics of this spiritual deception, but it was more a message of being prepared. The entity identified herself as being commonly known as Hathor, although she mentioned she'd be known by many other names throughout the ages, including maybe Fatima. Fatima was another being who was reported to have given Christian-specific messages to 3 young shepherd children in 1917 in Portugal. Looking into it, the messaging seems very much controlled by the Vatican, so I don't know how much of the information is true from the original transmission. But Hathor is an ancient Egyptian goddess of love, beauty, music, dance, motherhood, and fertility. Hathor is considered the sun god Ra's wife, and is also known as the Eye of Ra. In the mythology, she was also once suddenly transformed into a fierce lioness, a protector, an avenger, to punish humanity for becoming too bloodthirsty. Chris Bledsoe continues to have experiences on a weekly basis. Many of the entities he encounters look like a mix between greys and humans. In fact, I saw a post on Facebook about the recent 2025 Contact in the Desert event, where Bledsoe led a skywatch. It sounds like they had some powerful sightings. Although there were conflicting reports, he was also pictured returning to a private plane after the event. Make of that what you will. According to the Bledsoe family, the CIA, NASA, and other governmental and covert entities have all tried to learn of his experiences. One individual, known as Tim Taylor, who seems to have some official connections, showed the family a National Reconnaissance Office mission patch which depicts a woman, maybe the lady in white, holding a fireball which could be linked to symbolise the sun or solar energy. One aspect of Chris's story that piqued my interest was the guidance he was given to share, which can be found in his book, UFO of God. When the red star of Regulus aligns just before the dawn in the gaze of the Sphinx, a new knowledge shall come into the world. From what he understands, this is around Easter 2026, based on calculations performed by someone at NASA who advised the Bledsoes of the celestial timings. This is fascinating because the Sphinx faces the horizon and is orientated almost exactly due east, so it gazes upon stars like Regulus as they rise. Regulus is one of the royal stars, part of the Leo constellation, and is the brightest of the stars. More specifically, it is seen as the heart of the lion. There are many who have said the original Sphinx has been altered and modified over the eons, with the original actually being a complete lion rather than a lion's body, with a human figurehead as it is now. Similar to the NRO mission patch with the Hathor-style lady, Space Force Delta 18, which is Space Force's intelligence unit, has another very interesting mission patch, with a Sphinx-like character aligned with a globe and a singular star. Could this be Regulus? This gets even more interesting with Edgar Cayce's prophecy for 2026. Edgar Cayce is known as the Sleeping Prophet, due to his ability to go into a deep trance and act as a pure channel, to provide people with practical advice on how to heal from illness and disease. But he was also used to answer ancient historical questions about civilizations such as Atlantis, and in this case, future prophecy. Cayce advised that in 2026 would usher in the discovery of a hidden chamber underneath the Sphinx. He is quoted as saying, "It holds the record of events that occurred in Atlantis since the time the Sphinx was built, as well as the achievements of this extraordinary civilization." End quote. Not only is it prophesied that it would grant a greater understanding of Atlantis, but also usher in the second coming of Christ, along with a deep spiritual knowledge and understanding of the origins of the human race. Another important connected story is the use of new radar technologies headed up by Italian and Scottish researchers, who've claimed to have found an underground city and architecture stretching for 65,000 feet for around 2 kilometers. Could this be what Cayce prophesied? Or will there be more discoveries using these powerful technologies, specifically around the Sphinx? As you can see, there is a very revealing thread of information concerning Chris Bledsoe's experiences and how much it all interlinks with other data points. Edgar Cayce. As we've just touched upon Cayce's information, there is significantly more to his prophecies, including huge dramatic earth changes with disastrous earthquakes destroying major cities around the world, along with the sinking of various certain areas of continents. But inversely, new areas of land will rise up from the depths of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. There are many maps you can find on the internet that try to visualize some of Cayce's predictions. The sun. That big circle of bright light in the sky, the sun, provides light, heat, and life. It's supposed to represent the truth of all things. It's always given me comfort that the sun is absolute truth, in a reality of misconceptions. Now, unfortunately, I've even started to doubt the sun. Is nothing sacred? There is so much to unpack: the idea of a second sun, solar flares causing spiritual shifts, DNA changes, but also huge potential catastrophic earth changes because of the sun's fluctuating and shifting energy. Podcaster and researcher Crow 777, who is widely famed for discovering the lunar wave by filming HD quality video of the moon that detailed a strange wave-like glitch in the image of the moon. Crow has also discovered a second sun, faintly visible through his solar telescope, slightly to the side of our existing known solar body. This huge celestial body has been captured by Crow countless other times and by other amateur sky observers all over the world. And they made sure that it wasn't a reflection, a technical issue, or lens flare. It's a slightly dim looking sun that they repeatedly keep being confronted with. Crow's findings highlight huge concerns when considering US governmental bodies such as NASA and also educational institutions all over the world in terms of how much is being hidden from the public concerning what space actually is and how these celestial bodies operate. Here's a snippet of Crow's discovery.
You'll see a little thing go by. This is the first time in the spring of 2016 that I discovered the double sun. There's the sun we see with our eyes. I'm still scanning around. I'm going to scan back over and find the other object for the first time. There it is, top of frame. This is the sun we do not see with our eyes. Now, I was afraid to post this for a long time. You're going to see that it will blur out. I'll mess with focus. I put a huge wrapping paper tube over the end of the Solar Max scope. When you see the disturbance over the face of this, that's what's going on. I'm trying to prove that this isn't lens flare, but all those there, right there. I also take my hand and I do light blocking over the end of the scope, which ironically, the gentleman who I'm about to introduce to you, who you should all go sub, saw this footage way back in 2016 and he replicated what I did, which I'm going to show you here in a minute, which is proof positive. Another individual doing it. Scanning back, there's a little bit of lens flare. There's the real sun that we see with our eyes in the bottom of frame coming back into frame. Now I'm going to load another clip that I shot. I think I did this 3 or 4 days in a row, coming back to try to confirm this. Now here's a new clip. There's the sun you see with your eyes. That is legitimate lens flare right there. Scan out. There's the sun we don't see with our eyes on a new day. I'm confirming it once again. In a minute here, I'm going to load footage from a gentleman called Chris Van Meter, who took out equipment and replicated exactly what I did here, which is proof in the pudding, but he did something more. In one of the clips, you're going to see a telephone line going in front of the sun we do not see, which is also proof in itself. Again, there's the sun we see. Here comes Chris's footage. There's the name of his channel. You should all go up and sub him. There's the sun we see with our eyes, and there's the sun we do not. That noise is because this is a rip of a rip. We'll have better footage of this as we move along, but there is this. He is confirming in the same spot, in the same year, in spring, what I did.
This second sun idea was confirmed by what was described as a prominent and respected astronomer, Paul Cox. You can see and hear the admission for yourself. It's part of an 8-hour stream in 2016 as part of the SLOW website, an online educational tool for school-based astronomy learning. This organisation, it should be noted, has worked in collaboration with NASA many times.
Here we are with the live views from the solar telescope just behind me. It's what SLU members are going to watch every single day from now on. And you can see there the sun is on the left. You can see the small black dot, which is just to the right of center of the sun. That is the tiny orb of Mercury. Mercury, you now know so many interesting and fascinating facts from SLU astronomer Bob Berman. You'll be able to tell all your friends. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is that large round thing to the right of the sun? Well, that's our second sun. I don't know if you knew that we had a second sun, but there it is. It's normally hidden from view. NASA and other organizations, they usually hide that stuff away from us. They don't tell us the truth, but there it is. It's true. Anyway, I want to welcome our next guest.
The Daily Mirror here in the United Kingdom reported on this very startling truth. NASA cover-up. Astronomer claims second sun exists, but space agency usually hides it. Date 6th of June 2016. Prominent and respected astronomer Paul Cox claims NASA doesn't normally let us see the second sun. This shocking admission by a respected astronomer has sent conspiracy theorists into overdrive after he claimed there was a second sun that NASA usually hides. Astronomer Paul Cox was reporting an 8-hour live show about the transits of Mercury across the sun on the website SLOW. As he was talking about where Mercury currently is on the screen, he speaks to the camera and says, "You may be asking yourself, what is that large round thing to the right of the sun? Well, that's our second sun. I don't know if you knew we had a second sun, but there it is. It's normally hidden from view. NASA and other organisations usually hide that stuff away from us. They don't tell us the truth. But there it is. It's true." Blogger Jacob Israel, who is not a conspiracy theorist but is looking into the existence of Nibiru, also known as Planet X, told the camera he was shocked. He said a very, very prominent astronomer from SLOW basically came out while Mercury was doing its transit across the sun, and Paul Cox says clearly that we have two suns and mentions Nibiru and says NASA covers things up. I listened to it a couple of times. Could they be joking around? But if that's true, I will say I find it interesting that these astronomers would say what they said. Coming from somebody who is credible in the field and professional, when you say stuff like that, it's meant to be taken seriously. It's not a joke. Returning back to Crow 777 and his research, he had a rather interesting guest in both April and May of this year, Weston Warren, a traditionally trained academic who is now focused on inventions and science surrounding air and surface purification. He appears to be a student of all sciences and part of an independent network of other scientists and thinkers who have really left the constraints of mainstream thinking. All of the information they have collected as a group really contests the majority of mainstream orthodoxy. During their conversation, they seriously explored the idea that our solar system, whatever that is, has a binary sun companion, which can also be referred to as the black sun. It is his opinion that majority of solar systems are in fact binary in nature. Because of the second black star electromagnetic emitter, its energy is highly likely to be influencing the Earth and other surrounding inner planets. It is theorized that electromagnetic frequencies outside of the normal visible spectrum affect planetary cores and are highly likely to trigger geological events. So this then ties into the cyclical idea of expansion of the planet, tectonic shifts, and the resets of civilizations that have more than likely occurred and have been hidden from common knowledge. This sun companion could be the direct cause of increased strange fluctuating weather, the destabilization of the Earth's electromagnetic field, warming seas, increased prevalence of earthquakes due to magma expansion in the core, volcanoes, and increased instances of solar flares. This reason alone could be why governments and institutions around the world want to keep this knowledge secret, maybe to prevent panic it would create. But could these extra powerful energies also affect us psychologically and spiritually? Yes, according to Weston Warren, who sees a very real split developing between people who are more spiritually involved, with the energies actually assisting them spiritually, and the positive upgrading of their DNA. Conversely, he highlights that these electromagnetic energies are negatively affecting people, driving them into more animalistic behaviours. This could be the reason for the heightened sense of emotion we are witnessing in people around the world. It was his opinion that DNA acts in some way as an antenna. Ordinarily, if you search for positive effects of DNA from the sun, the majority of mainstream information points towards the sun being very damaging. But if you really do some deeper digging, there is a lot of research out there and information that completely contradicts this worldview. For starters, there is research that is linked to the repair of DNA through vitamin D and protease enzymes as a result of sunlight. This then all ties into the demonizing of the sun, skin cancer linkages, the spraying of skies for weather modification and solar dimming, anything to stop us from having an affinity and reverence for the sun and its energy. Back to Weston's research, the etheric or spiritual realms he described as defined as counter space, with the sun we see acting as a lens or portal for these spiritual energies, with the possible black star shadowy presence only amplifying the process. Culturally, you can also find some interesting nods to these ideas or possibilities. The MasterCard logo, for instance, with the slightly translucent red and orange spheres intersecting each other, is one example. Is this admission of hidden truth? And David Bowie, who interestingly died in 2016 in relation to the second video clip I just presented. Bowie's final album was called Black Star, and the visuals and lyrics were peppered with mythology, esoteric symbolism, and messages. Not to mention, if the album cover and artwork with the 5 pointed stars was exposed to sunlight, it would reveal hidden stars and symbols. And if under artificial blacklight, it would reveal an illuminated blue glow. Again, is Bowie alluding to hidden knowledge that will unfold in our reality in the future. Bunkers and billionaires. This ties into the so-called upper tier of society, billionaires of the world and their predilection to build remote estates in places like Hawaii and New Zealand, but also the building of deep underground bunkers for the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Larry Ellison, and James Cameron. That's just to name a few of the overt billionaires. Obviously, we have no understanding or information on ancient bloodline families that could be key manipulators and working on behalf of non-human forces. This narrative then ties into ideas of large underground cities and existing civilizations in places like Antarctica, which may have existed stretching back to World War II, or maybe even earlier.
Now, billionaires have many obsessions. Supercars, ice baths, exotic animals, you name it, and billionaires usually have it. But of late, they seem to have a new obsession: bunkers. The top 1% are building bunkers. Mark Zuckerberg is constructing one in Hawaii, and it's worth $270 million, $270 million. It's almost like a status symbol now. But why do the super rich need bunkers? Are they trying to survive a war? Maybe another pandemic? Or an apocalypse? Do they know something that we do not? Our next report tells you.
Blast-resistant doors, equipped with its own food and energy supplies. This is a 5,000 square foot shelter located underground in Hawaii. The price tag of the project is $270 million. If you want to survive an apocalypse, this is the place to be. Who does this belong to? Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. The billionaire is building a bunker, and he isn't the only one. Former PayPal CEO Peter Thiel tried to build one in New Zealand. Bill Gates has plenty of underground security areas, apparently one under each of his homes. Of course, these are the higher end ones, but you could get yourself a basic one for $500,000. It's almost like buying an expensive car. And for billionaires, it's a good way to use some loose change. But where are they building them? Apparently all over the world. But a popular choice seems to be New Zealand. It's attributed to its secluded location, which brings us to the boom in the companies building these survival shelters. Some of them are just basic shelters. They are underground, they have all the essentials, you can survive there for a few weeks. But a handful of them go a step further, like this one project that includes an island fortress. This is not just a bunker, the entire island is like a fort, with an inflammable moat. Basically, if you try to step foot on the island, it will burn down, but you will be perfectly safe inside the underground bunker. Sounds perfect for a zombie apocalypse. But why are the super rich building bunkers? What are they so scared of? In the last 5 years, the world has survived a lot. A global pandemic, 2 wars, climate change. Some of these bunkers have registered nurses, a collection of drugs, decontamination booths, medical supplies. One even has a full-fledged operating table. Basically, you can survive anything in there. It's almost like modern-day Noah's Ark. If you are in the bunker, you are likely to survive almost all catastrophes. But it's not for everyone, it's only for the chosen few. And here, Noah is not making the choice. The world's super rich are making it for themselves. But beneath all these underground bunkers lies a dark truth. It's that death is truly the great equalizer. And the super rich, just like us, fear it too. They cannot buy their way out of it, even with these underground bunkers and fortresses. But that hasn't stopped them from trying.
Earth's disaster cycle. Earth's disaster cycle is a mixture of interconnecting facets, which include solar activity, the Earth's magnetic field, and magnetic polar shifts. It's all one connecting paradigm. Traditionally, the Earth experiences long periods of geological calm, with cyclical disaster cycles that occur roughly every 12,000 years. We are currently well overdue the next one. The main aspect of this is the movement of the poles, which is apparently underway and has rapidly shifted since the 2000s. These events are intensified by the accelerated weakening of the magnetic field. Disruption to our environment can include the delicate navigation of animals, mass extinctions, volcanism, earthquakes, and climate change. This cycle isn't only affecting Earth, again it's affecting many other planets in our solar system. The source of this cycle originally I always thought was maybe due to moving through space, the galaxy, whatever mass or vacuum our solar system sits in, moving closer towards the central galactic sun, which is a slightly new age spiritual concept I've picked up upon. But there are some who link it to a phenomenon called the galactic current sheet, which is a vast ripping electric and magnetic structure in the Milky Way that passes through the solar system every 12,000 years. But of course, we could also theorise from what we learned earlier and the connection to the second sun. maybe it's this potential black star, binary star influence that's initiating these seismic shifts. Whatever the source, the effects all remain the same, with also the key aspect and addition of a potential micronova or a coronal mass ejection of the Sun. Due to the weakened Earth's magnetic field, our very fragile electrical grid would be rendered useless and unrepairable. Geologically, the effects of the Sun's sudden huge energy blast would further influence and deeply affect the Earth's crusts and interconnecting disaster elements. Yes, this all does sound pretty dire, and even if you were a billionaire, could you really escape this type of catastrophe? It also maybe gives context to why Elon Musk is working feverishly to get to Mars, but also why Trump has been pushing to acquire Canada, Mexico, and Greenland. But could this have a spiritual component, with the New Age talk of moving into 5D or the creation of a second Earth, the rapture? Could all of this have a divine reasoning and purpose? Deep down, I'd really like to think so. These spiritual or religious aspects is what we're going to tackle next. The Kali Yuga. The Yuga cycle is a very ancient Indian cosmology concept with repeating cycles. The cycles are described as Satya, golden, Treta, silver, and Dwapara, bronze, and Kali, which is iron or dark age. Satya is the obvious golden age, the pinnacle of consciousness in human experience. But as time drips by away from this age, consciousness declines through the various cycles. According to author and researcher Bidhudev Misra, cycles aren't just mythology and fairy tales. They can be physically tracked and supported by real data, such as the change in the shape and volume of humanity's skull. Plus, our ancient landscapes are littered with megalithic architecture and evidence of advanced civilizations. Misra claims in his work that elites and controlled institutions have hidden knowledge and evidence of the cycles of nature and of the yugas. As a result, many of the timelines people lay out for the yugas are highly inaccurate. The Kali Yuga or Age of Kali is the darkest of all the yugas, characterized by people who are largely selfish, greedy, and dominantly focused on material wealth and sensual pleasure, with the poor largely oppressed and the wealthy dominating many of the lower tiers of society. Misra, through his research, claims that in March 2025 we started to come into Kali. Traditionally, yugas are represented in hefty time spans, counted in millions of years, but Misra measures them in a much shorter lengths, or half cycles of 12,000 years, which coincides with the Earth's disaster cycles we mentioned earlier. This then roughly corresponds to the precession of the equinoxes, which is around 25,800 years. As we are transitioning away from Kali, all yugas, especially now, are linked to global cataclysms, such as floods, fires, impacts from comets and asteroids, and sometimes maybe even great wars. Again, another correlation to a hidden external electromagnetic source, Misra connects all of these consciousness shifts and earth changes to what he describes as a central black hole, or the activation of the galactic center. Hopi prophecy. The Hopi, a Native American tribe now found in the southwest United States in Arizona, have some of the strongest and most extensive prophecies when it comes to world cycles. They believe that humanity has endured 4 worlds or cycles. The first world was destroyed by fire, which could have been through a comet impact or volcanic eruptions. The second world was destroyed by ice, likely an ice age. The third world by a great flood, which correlates to many other mythologies from various cultures. We are currently in the fourth world. The current age is marked by corruption, greed, spiritual degeneration, and an obsession with technology. Some of the key signs of the end of the fourth world include the coming of a white-skinned people, European colonization, the arrival of the spinning wheels filled with voices, which could be cars with radios maybe, webs across the land, which could denote electrical cabling and other networks, black ribbons could be roads, and roads in the sky, which could denote aircraft and contrails. Humanity has 2 potential paths detailed within a prophecy rock petroglyph. One is a zigzag path of technological excess, leading to collapse. The second is represented by a lower line and represents the traditional way of life, agrarian spirituality, harmony with nature, community, and the divine. When these destructive resets have occurred, the Hopi have been taken down into underground areas by the Ant people, who nurtured and fed the Hopi while the earth was undergoing its changes. They were given these prophecies to pass down orally and to prepare the Hopis for the end of the Fourth World. The end of the Fourth World will be known by a series of key prophetic signs, which include cobwebs in the sky, contrails or chemtrails, then the blue star Kachina will appear. This could be read as a comet, or if you're thinking out of the box, intelligent plasma consciousness, angels, or maybe even an ET or interdimensional craft. Then the red star Kachina will carry out the destruction. Those that have lived the straight, the true spiritual path will be granted to transcend to the fifth world. This transition is called the Great Purification and includes the return of Pahana, the true white brother. He will wear red and come from the east, carrying the missing piece of the sacred tablet stone bearing specific symbols. This will identify him as a genuine spiritual leader. He will have the power to judge whether people who have lived by divine spiritual principles and are permitted to survive and move on into the fifth world. There is so much to the Hopi prophecies, and again, the depths and correlation to other aspects of information out there is truly astounding. Particularly from a Christian point of view, Pahana is seen as a messianic Jesus or Yeshua type of character. Christian end times. The second coming of Christ, where the Son of God will return to judge the living and the dead and re-establish his kingdom. Before his return, there will be a period of very intense turbulence and difficulty and widespread pain and suffering called the Great Tribulation. This time will be marked by wars, natural disasters, and the rise of many different false prophets throughout society. Another aspect of the chaos involves the desecration of somewhere very holy, which will be labelled as the abomination of desolation. Toward the end of the Great Tribulation, Jesus' armies will defeat and vanquish all elements of evil from the land. The Antichrist and the false prophet will be destroyed to save the true believers. This period will be known as the Battle of Armageddon. After the biblical battles and the end of Armageddon, Jesus will enjoy a 1,000-year reign of earth, where all evil and Satan will be bound and unable to deceive all nations and their people. All curses will be lifted, and justice and peace will reign for 1,000 years. After the 1,000 years of peace and justice, Satan will be unleashed again for the final rebellion, which is abruptly ended. All of the dead are resurrected and brought before the great white throne, where all who have rejected God are cast into the fire. Finally, the new creation, a new heaven and earth is made. The old world is destroyed for eternity. God's people will finally be able to dwell with him forever. Obviously, much of the narratives of these end times will greatly differ between denominations. The imagery and concepts are every bit as warlike and visceral as the times and consciousness when these texts were created for the Bible. So it is a real, true reflection of those times. But overall, these catastrophic events are again threaded and deeply ingrained within Western culture, and the themes and archetypes are viscerally felt throughout all stories and cultures. You can take a softer approach from the New Age perspective, with the returning of Christ not actually being a physical being, but a type of consciousness within. No longer will people rely on a third party or middleman to access higher levels of consciousness and the divine. Much of this is detailed in the book of Revelations, found in the New Testament. Wingmakers. The following material is a very late addition to this end times critique that I'm presenting to you today. The Wingmaker's story very recently came back into my reality, maybe for a reason, but I thought I'd explore some of the themes. The entire narrative is very strange, elusive, and interesting. The Wingmaker's material, its whole ethos relies on writing, music, and art. It remains a very complex mythology of science fiction, ufology, parapsychology, theosophy, and conspiracies. It all began in 1996, where it's alleged 2 students in Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, United States, discovered a mystical metallic object. The object was found close to a spiral cave system that housed 23 chambers of cultural artifacts, wall paintings, alien technologies, and coded hieroglyphics. The find was made secret by covert groups and hidden from public view. Eventually, the details were allegedly leaked by one of the scientists who worked on the findings. The material is thought to have stemmed from future aspects of humanity as a time capsule to help us develop and understand ourselves and our place in the universe. The brief understanding of our reality is that humans are trapped in a suppression framework or human mind system that was engineered by beings, maybe the Anunnaki. This human experience was designed specifically to enslave interdimensional beings by placing them in human bodies. The human experience is designed to stop humans from being conscious of the true reality of the oneness, what's called the sovereign integral. Within the material, they discuss end times as the great portal, or the era of transparency and expansion, where humanity collectively realise its true nature. It's not a period of destruction, but a new era of awareness and equality. The material very much speaks of the shadow self and integrating shadow aspects, the lower aspects of self, as part of this returning to awareness and oneness, so it heavily relates to Jungian concepts and teachings. Carl Jung. So how much of these end times are really an ending of the old self, an inside job, rather than experiencing external catastrophe? Apparently Carl Jung was very aware of the apocalypse archetype as a recurring concept throughout human cultures all over the world. This archetype reveals deep inner truths about transformation, judgment, and renewal. Although, having said that, it is reported that Jung in his final years of life had a very powerful vision of the last 50 years of humanity. He realised there was a profound period of change and catastrophe ahead. He saw in detail that the Earth, in many areas, would be devastated. He eventually dedicated a whole book, Aeon, to exploring apocalyptic thinking and the meanings behind the Book of Revelation. He saw the destruction, but also the symbolism of renewal. So much of Jung's work and the visions could be seen as archetypal and psychological rather than literal events. Conclusion. So, as the final bell tolls and as we dive headfirst towards apocalyptic fiery end of our journey through the end times destructive thinking and exploration, it does feel that we are inherently encoded as humans with end times psychology. If you believe in the reincarnation cycle, there is a distinct possibility you may have experienced huge destructive earth changes many times before. This could be merely a repeating cycle, baked into these human vessels we inhabit through our family lineages and epigenetics. I can't help but think there are spiritual reasons and effects behind these end-time prophecies. Maybe this transformation of self will be mentally painful, but not physically. Maybe this is an inside job, and the external reality simulating falling comets, great wars, earth tectonic shifts resulting in volcanoes or earthquakes and solar flashes is a reflection of what's been happening deep inside us collectively. There is undoubtedly a common thread that moves and weaves itself throughout various religious or spiritual orthodoxies and end times mythology. I didn't even really touch upon more New Age concepts such as the return of Christ consciousness and the idea of new Earths or humanity moving into 5D. Currently, there is so much information being garnered from channeled sources, but also via QHHT data from hypnotized individuals talking to their potential higher selves. The world out there is chaotic, and it's increasingly hard to really trust sources of information which previously you used to latch onto and revere. This could be part of the process, a foghorn call in the misty darkness to return to yourself, decode yourself. I think what is guaranteed is a series of very eventful years ahead. How all this unfolds in our personal experiences and the wider collective human experience remains to be seen. Thanks so much for joining me. Till next time, bye bye.